Chapter 450. His surname was Zhong, but he didn't tell his full name. This 30-year-old young man was the big boss behind Fei Entertainment. Chung Yuan looked at him with surprise. Naturally, he felt a sense of oppression from this young big boss. He thought to himself, this guy has a strong aura. After Chung Yun's brief introduction, he sat down slowly. This wasn't a private room of a luxurious hotel, nor a small room of a famous restaurant, but a luxuriously decorated music club, K&C. Chung Yuan had heard of K&C, which was a place where some rich kids liked to hang out. Of course, many people would try their best to show their faces here. This was because there were often many well-known musicians or people in the entertainment industry who would appear here. Relax, just like a normal chat. The big boss with the surname Zhong was naturally the second young master of the Zhong family, Zhong Luochen. Chung Yun praised him. Zhong Luochen naturally wanted to see what kind of person could make Chung Yun praise him. He was very clear that Chung Yun had always been very careful. If he wasn't sure about something, he wouldn't dare to be so flamboyant and promise in front of him. Mr. Zhong said to relax. So let's relax. Come on, Chung Yuan, what do you want to drink? Chung Yun immediately began to adjust the atmosphere. Li Zifeng naturally didn't dare to say anything. He wouldn't say anything to stop Chung Yuan before he figured out the character of this big boss behind the scene. I don't know much about wine. Chung Yuan shook his head. Director Chung, you can make the decision. Okay, I'll make the decision. Chung Yun smiled. This was giving him face. He liked others giving him face. Of course, most of the brands could be found here. After all, most of the people here were drinking and chatting. Of course, playing music was also the main thing. As for food, there were only fruits and snacks. Then, Chung Yuan found this Mr. Zhong rarely spoke. He was quiet without appearing to be superior, but at the same time, people didn't dare to act rashly. They were both young, but the gap between them was like heaven and earth to Chung Yuan. At this time, Chung Yun suddenly stopped talking and said, "All right, Chung Yuan, since we are here, why don't you show us what you've got?" Sure enough, they had come. Chung Yuan said in his heart. From the moment he walked into this K&C, his intuition told him that it wouldn't be so simple. It seemed that no matter what he said, it was not as good as seeing it for himself. This big boss wanted to test him, but he had enough confidence. No matter how much he said, it was not as convincing as the facts. Then let's do it. Chung Yuan nodded in a natural and unrestrained manner and revealed a trace of a smile. He was prepared for this. Or rather, he never left the guitar that he got from the mysterious merchant. Even when he entered K&C, he still brought it with him. You're quite confident. Seeing Chung Yuan on the stage, Zhong Luochen smiled faintly. In Li Zifeng's eyes, this smile was almost perfect, so perfect like a dream. But he had a feeling that it wasn't from his heart, but a kind of like the best actor's smile. Was his big boss playing himself wholeheartedly? Such a thought flashed in Li Zifeng's mind, but he didn't care about it. Was it necessary to play himself? It could only be said that this man was too perfect. Chung Yun smiled apologetically. Mr. Zhong, you should listen to his live performance. Zhong Luochen didn't say anything, just waved his hand, and then slowly turned his head, waiting quietly. At this time, Chung Yuan was negotiating with K&C. He didn't ask other temporary performers to perform. They weren't his partners, so he couldn't put them together. So after plugging in the audio cable and adjusting the volume, Chung Yuan sat on the high stool on the small stage. He had the experience of performing on stage, so naturally he wouldn't have stage fright. The magical guitar in his hand gave him a strong confidence. Chung Yuan held the microphone in front of him, smiling. The atmosphere here is so good, I'll sing something. Hotel California. I hope you like it. Different from the original singer's voice, Chung Yuan's voice was obviously young and full of tension. After several days of singing lessons, Chung Yuan corrected some small mistakes in the past, so the first line of the song was more natural and smooth than before. When the sound of the guitar rang out, it had already caught the attention of the guests in the K&C. In K&C, there were many people in the circle, and occasionally some big names in the circle would appear. The people here all had some professional knowledge. However, This knowledge was impacted by the sound of the guitar like never before. It was obviously a very simple start, and there wasn't much skill involved, but the first note was able to turn into quicksand, slowly dragging people into a soft and powerless whirlpool and sinking deeper and deeper, as if they couldn't extricate themselves. Some female customers even began to show a fascinated look. K&C suddenly became quiet, as if it was late at night. People seemed to be brought to this foreign hotel in the middle of the night, looking at the dusk around it. Zhong Luochen also listened to all the guests, but at the same time, he could also carefully observe the reactions of the people around him. Their expressions, their movements, their gazes, none of them escaped the eyes of the second young master of the Zhong family. He was very clear that these people had been conquered by the young man playing the guitar on the stage, but he himself was not. He was not interested. Zhong Luochen soon found his problem. He had lost his interest. Not only that, even love, the joy of happiness, and so on. Only the sense of achievement could make his mood rise. Obviously, listening to Chung Yiran's singing didn't bring him any sense of achievement. Perhaps, after this young man got outstanding achievements in the music circle as the behind-the-scenes driving force, he would feel the achievement spontaneously, and then he would be happy. Of course, no one could guess Zhong Luochen's thoughts, and the surrounding guests had been immersed in Chung Yiran's performance, so no one paid attention to him. Even Chung Yun didn't pay attention to Zhong Luochen at this moment. Zhong Luochen frowned when he noticed this. He knew the thoughts of his follower, and also knew that he was flattering and temporarily showing his loyalty all the time. But now, he seemed to have forgotten these. This was too abnormal. Zhong Luochen then began to study the appearance of the guests, feeling more and more strange, as if they were possessed. Suddenly, Chung Yiran knocked on the microphone, whispering, "Thank you for listening." It turned out that Chung Yiran's song had been unknowingly finished, and the guests in K&C. At this time, all of a sudden, there was applause. Naturally, it couldn't be compared with the applause of the audience in a concert, but all the guests present applauded. This was something that had never happened before in K&C's history. This young guitarist had already conquered the ears of everyone present. The guests were still unsatisfied, and a woman's voice sounded, asking Chung Yiran to continue. Someone spoke, and endless requests began to appear. Chung Yiran was at a loss as he looked at the table where Li Zifeng and the others were sitting. He found that Li Zifeng nodded to him, indicating that it was okay. "Then, I'll sing another song." Chung Yiran smiled slightly. This feeling of being sought after was like the datura flower, intoxicating. The guests once again fell into an uncontrollable intoxication. As for Zhong Luochen, he once again fell into doubt. Because he could not be intoxicated, he felt like an outsider. So, he gradually had some ideas or conjectures, previously unknown in one night. Zhong Luochen narrowed his eyes slightly, which reminded him of a certain place the boss. He could find that place through the Zhong family. Why couldn't others? Everyone. Hello, I'm Li Zifeng. Maybe some of you here know me, and I also see a few acquaintances. Chung Yiran sang a total of 4 songs in a row. Then he got off the stage. He felt that if he didn't take the initiative to get off the stage, the people here would continue to listen and even sing until his throat became hoarse. But this was too abnormal, or in other words, the power of this guitar was too strong, so Chung Yiran couldn't help but worry about something. After he got off the stage, Li Zifeng immediately caught up with him. "Just now, this is Chung Yiran. I hope you can all remember his name. Because next, Chung Yiran will be the focus of our Feiyun entertainment to promote a newcomer. I hope you can pay more attention to him in the future." The guests chuckled, of course. They remembered the name Chung Yiran. This guy's good at advertising. Zhong Luochen smiled faintly, looking at Chung Yun and saying. Chung Yun saw that Zhong Luochen was satisfied with this effect, so he immediately said, "This Li Zifeng, after so long, he has some ability and means. Second young master, if you think he's good, why don't we put him in an important position?" Chung Yun wouldn't insult someone in front of Zhong Luochen, because he knew this second young master didn't like people who gossiped. "Do as you deem fit." Zhong Luochun suddenly stood up, twisting the buttons of his suit, saying indifferently, I have something to do, so I'll go back first. You don't need to see me off. This Chung Iran is good. Train him well. He's worth training. Second young master, take care. Chung Yun said respectfully. Now that Li Zifeng and Chung Iran weren't here, he naturally could call him second young master. When Chung Iran came back, Zhong Luochun left at the same time. The two passed by each other. Chung Iran met Zhong Luochun's eyes, seeing a faint smile in his eyes, and subconsciously gave start. The moment Zhong Luochun walked past, he suddenly said softly, You need to learn how to conceal yourself. What did he mean? Chapter 451. Eat slowly, don't choke. On one of the beds in the public ward, Jin Xiao gently woke Hong Guan up. This Hong Guan ate too fast, as if he was swallowing it. It's okay. I have to eat faster. I have to go to work later. Hong Guan drank a mouthful of water and said with a smile. Jin Xiao said with some heartache, You don't have to come here at noon. Look at you. You are tired. Hong Guan said happily, The place where I work is full of men. How can they be better looking than you? Damn you. Jin Xiao rolled her eyes, but she obviously couldn't hide the joy in her heart. I will peel some grapefruit for you. You can eat it on the way. Hong Guan suddenly received a phone call at this time. He was afraid to disturb the people next to him, so he walked out of the ward. Soon after, Hong Guan returned to Jin Xiao's side. His face was somewhat strange. What's wrong? Jin Xiao asked curiously. Hong Guan was taken aback as he patted his face. Then, he looked at his wife and said, Someone came looking for me just now and asked if I wanted to work at the television station. He said that if I had time in the afternoon, I should go to the television station to meet him. Jin Xiao was obviously a little surprised by this news. Unlike the past, when he drifted to Beijing, he could find a lot of opportunities. In some local TV stations, the entry threshold was relatively high. At least, Hong Guan had never entered the TV station in this city. Of course, as one of the landmarks, Hong Guan still knew where the TV station was. To Hong Guan's surprise, it seemed that he was the only one who came here to participate in the so-called interview. The reason why he came here was, of course, to see what happened. Is this Mr. Hong Guan? In a small office, Hong Guan saw the person who called him, Mr. E. Of course, in addition to Mr. E, Hong Guan also saw Li Zifeng, whom he had met once before. For a moment, he seemed to understand why he received a call from the TV station. What happened next was very simple. Mr. E asked him if he was willing to take a job in the TV station. The contract he signed was a non-official contract. Naturally, he wouldn't have the same standard of treatment as an official, but it was much better than his job in the garage. Mr. Hong Guan, is there any problem with this temporary contract? Hong Guan knew that this was a good opportunity. Many people racked their brains and were willing to stay here even if the pay was lower. Because if he stayed here, he would be able to open a door for his future and opportunity. Can I think about it? Hong Guan hesitated for a while before he said something that surprised Li Zifeng and Mr. E. Mr. E looked at Li Zifeng. Obviously, he wanted to see what Li Zifeng was going to say. Before this, he was just selling a favor to Li Zifeng. As for this Hong Guan, it was not his business whether he accepted it or not. After all, he had already helped her. Whether she accepted it or not was her business. How about this? You two talk first? Mr. E smiled and said, I'll go to the bathroom first. Mr. E said and went out of the door very calmly, leaving Li Zifeng and Hong Guan alone. Just when they were silent, Li Zifeng suddenly said with a smile, Mr. Hong, is it because it's too sudden that you can't react? No, actually, Hong Guan said, I really can't react in time. Mr. Li, why are you helping me? To be honest, I'm also doing something for Iran. Li Zifeng smiled and said, You know, Iran, our company values him very much. Of course, we will try our best to satisfy his small request. Iran. Hong Guan was stunned. You mean, this is his idea? Li Zifeng suddenly said, You can take it as my suggestion. Okay, Mr. Hong, I heard from Iran that you have some financial difficulties. I think this job may be able to help you. Hong Guan frowned. Why didn't he tell me in person? Mr. Hong, you know Iran is very busy now. Li Zifeng still smiled and said, In addition, if possible, I hope you will not take the initiative to find him in the future. After all, I don't want him to be distracted during this period. You know, the beginning is very important for a newcomer. Those paparazzi especially like to dig up the newcomers, especially the negative things, which are the bones for paparazzi to fight for. I don't want Iran to be harassed at the beginning and to have a quiet environment. What do you mean? Hongwan's face darkened slightly. What negative things? Mr. Hong, don't get me wrong. Li Zifeng said seriously. This is our company's plan. We intend to package Iran as a person who has always been working hard for his dream and never gives up. Packaging a kind of self-improvement image. So, some things should not be known to others as much as possible. I don't understand what you're talking about. Hongwan frowned. At this time, Li Zifeng suddenly moved his chair, facing Hongwan, and whispered, Mr. Hong, I know you formed a band and drifted in Beijing for a period of time. After a pause, Li Zifeng rubbed his hands and said, young people are immature, so it's understandable for them to be impulsive. In fact, it's not a big deal. Don't beat around the bush, just say it, Hongwan said in a low voice. Li Zifeng sighed. Well, then I'll say it directly. Mr. Hong, I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. I did check your background. Since they had investigated, they knew something. You, Duran, and another member of your band had committed a crime in the past and had a criminal record, and he had been in the detention center, right? Hongwan's face suddenly darkened. This was something they didn't want to mention, something they couldn't forget and let go of. Hongwan hadn't spoken for a long time, and that Mr. E couldn't go to the toilet for such a long time. He probably just waited outside for the result. But on the other hand, didn't it also prove that Li Zifeng was very capable? Mr. Li, Hongwan suddenly took a deep breath. Tell me honestly, is it your idea or Iran's? Li Zifeng said ambiguously, it's not important, Mr. Hong. The important thing is that we won't treat you badly. You see, this work is just the beginning, and you will have a chance to be formally authorized in the future. By the way, at this time, Li Zifeng took out a check from his suit and put it on the table, saying indifferently, Iran asked me to give this to you, saying that your wife is about to give birth and needs money. A check of 100,000 yuan. Why didn't he give it to me in person? Hongwan didn't move, but looked straight at Li Zifeng, which was a bit scary. Didn't I tell you? Also, he's really busy now. His schedule for the day is packed, and he doesn't have enough time to rest. Hongwan gritted his teeth. Okay, I know. 100,000 yuan? You really don't want it? Are you an idiot? What about the job in the TV station? Why don't you agree? In the garage, a man sat beside Hongwan. Strictly speaking, he was the boss of the garage, Hong Zhongshuan. In fact, he was also Hongwan's fellow countryman. Before Hongwan drifted to the north, he had worked as a mechanic for Hong Zhongshuan, his fellow countryman. It could be said that this boss was one of his few friends who were closer to him than some of his relatives. Uncle, you helped me when I was in the most difficult time. Hongwan shook his head and said, and it's almost the end of the year, and you are short of people. At this time, how can I leave now? Hong Zhongshuan shook his head and sighed. That's why I said you were stupid. I'm starting to understand why that so-called brother of yours was able to make his way up the ranks and make his debut, but you're still squatting here. Because you don't do anything. Uncle, Hongwan frowned. Hong Zhongshuan suddenly patted Hongwan's shoulder and said, but it's good that you are not like your brother, turning hostile after becoming famous. Bah, who do you think you are? Can some things be settled with money? Uncle, don't say that. Hongwan shook his head. Don't say that. I want to be alone. Hong Zhongshuan didn't say anything else, but patted Hongwan's shoulder and said, get off work early today and go to the hospital early to accompany your wife. What are you still thinking about? In fact, it's not that we can't separate, but the most terrible thing is to drag on. Hongwan's sight was unfocused, but his years of experience made him still able to sing and play even if he was distracted. But at the same time, he didn't pay attention to the people in front of his stall. But in the end, he saw a familiar person. During this period, Hongwan found that whenever he sang here, there would be this young man. At first, he was alone. Then the next day, he found this young man came with a very beautiful girl. The young man and the girl were really a good match. This was Hongwan's feeling. The two would always appear at some unknown time, quietly listening to him singing. Hongguan felt that time seemed to stop because of the arrival of the young man and the girl. It was not his time that stopped, but their time stopped. Although it was a subtle feeling, to be honest, Hongguan was quite happy with the arrival of this young man, because he could get the young man's tips every day. Several times, Hongguan wanted to thank him properly, but he always inadvertently lost track of the young man and the girl. But today, Hongguan discovered that he didn't receive any reward, because this young man simply brought along his maid and disappeared from the square at some unknown time. It was as if they had never stayed there today, like other passers-by. Hongguan tidied up his stall with a complicated expression. Chapter 452. Jinging Mountain, Seeping. With the ability of a Black Soul envoy, it was not particularly difficult to go to a place. Even a newcomer like Tai Inzi knew how to pass through walls, not to mention a veteran like Number 9 who had been an envoy for many years. The boss ordered Black Soul Number 9 to move forward without stopping. He entered the place marked on the map given by the boss early. But what puzzled Black Soul Number 9 was that he didn't get any further hints, even though he had already arrived at the place marked on the map. The red mark was still flashing on the map, but he didn't know what to do after arriving here. According to the boss, he needed Black Soul Number 9 to find something for him. Obviously, it was not easy to find, because according to Black Soul Number 9's words, it seemed that even the owner himself wasn't sure about what he was looking for. Was there something that the boss wasn't sure about? Black Soul Number 9 didn't believe in this situation, but Black Soul Number 9 had very good patience. Moreover, the new owner would not let the map give him such a hint for no reason. Perhaps he still needed to find some clues himself. So he came at Seeping, but he didn't know why he chose to stay here and wait. It was only because when he stepped into the Jinggang Mountains, the two words Seeping naturally appeared in his mind. Black Soul Number 9 thought that this was another hint from the new boss. But this place was full of historical aura everywhere. On the street with many museums and memorials, Black Soul Number 9 stood under an old tree, silently looking at an old house in the alley. Why did he look at it? He didn't know. San Air's life seemed to have changed a little, but it didn't seem to have changed anything. She still ran her tofu shop, took care of her daughter Xiaoji's daily life, and worked as usual. San Air felt that her life was actually like waiting for the cooked soy milk to cool down. The light milky yellow color was very calm, and there was only a trace of rising water vapor. However, the surface of the soy milk would solidify very quickly. As long as a bamboo stick was used to pick it up, it would be easy to pick up another thing that was full of wrinkles, tofu. Was Mark the tofu that she had congealed in her life? Put it here, okay. San Air, who was thinking about something in front of the millstone, suddenly heard Mark's voice from behind. She was almost shocked and quickly turned around. Mark was wearing an old shirt. It was originally a white shirt, but some parts of it had turned yellow. There were many molds next to Mark. These were the tools used to press the tofu into shape. The yellowing shirt, the rolled-up trousers, and the slightly cracked leather shoes. For a moment, San Air seemed to see a familiar figure that had long disappeared. Why did he have to wear these clothes? Oh, that's enough. San Air quickly nodded. Sorry to trouble you. You don't actually need to do all this. Maka said indifferently. It doesn't matter. I have nothing to do anyway. I'll put the things here. You can continue with your work. Mark didn't stay for too long. San Air found that Mark was a relatively silent person most of the time. He wouldn't communicate with her too much. Sometimes he might say a few words to Xiaoji, but that was only because he was annoyed by Xiaoji's pestering. Mark didn't say how long he would stay, and San Air didn't take the initiative to ask him how long he would stay. It seemed that this topic didn't exist, or everyone deliberately avoided this topic. San Air continued to work. That day, Zhang Kuan came and left after seeing Mark. The next day, he came again to make trouble. At that time, Mark didn't show up. He didn't even leave the small room where he lived. It was the neighbors who helped San Air. But that night, it was said that Zhang Kuan was drunk or something. He fell into a pit and broke his hands and feet. Now he was still lying in bed in the Colonel Hospital. He couldn't get out of bed for at least 1 or 2 months. Sometimes, San Air would wonder, did Zhang Kuan really meet with an accident? And that night, Mark didn't seem to go out of the room. But she still didn't know. She only knew that there was one more man in her tofu shop. It had nothing to do with her. It was just an accidental arrangement that made her pull him out of the river. The man claimed that he lost his memory. Then he said that his name was Mark, and he lived here temporarily. Steam curled up. Sen-air picked up a thin piece of shaped tofu skin and then hung it up to dry. When it was cold, it would become tofu. Chung-aran was busy all day, as usual. Of course, there was progress. After all, he enjoyed so many resources. Chung-aran could feel that the company seemed to pay more attention to him, because Chung-aran obviously spent more time on him these 2 days, and he was so polite that Chung-aran was surprised. But he still remembered that night when he saw Mr. Zhong in KNC, and the last sentence that Mr. Zhong said. After a day of classes, Chung-aran was a little tired. When he went back to the resting place, he found that Li Zifeng seemed to have been here for a while and was reading a magazine. This person was always able to arrange the things he needed very well. "Oh, you're back." Li Zifeng hurriedly put down the magazine and smiled. "How do you feel today?" "Not bad." Chung-aran, who had just sat down, was tired. His head knocked on the sofa, and he looked at the ceiling absent-mindedly. Li Zifeng laughed. "Come on, let me tell you good news. The time of your debut show has been fixed. It's a primetime program, and you have time to sing a song and interact with the host. That's really good news." Chung-aran recovered some spirit and nodded. Li Zifeng said, "Work hard. I'm waiting for your first victory." Chung-aran was full of confidence. But Li Zifeng suddenly said, "Iran, I went to see Hongguan yesterday." "Really?" Chung-aran nodded. "What did he say?" Li Zifeng paused and shook his head. "He refused me and didn't want the job in the TV station." "Why?" Chung-aran was stunned. "Isn't it good?" Li Zifeng smiled bitterly. "It is good, but he said something to me." "Iran, tell me honestly, are you hiding something from the company?" Chung-aran was stunned and subconsciously thought of the guitar. Did he find out something? Chung-aran couldn't help but recall the performance in front of the big boss. That night, although he conquered all the guests, he didn't see anything strange about the big boss, Mr. Zhong. The boss didn't seem to be affected by the guitar, and finally said something to him that he didn't understand. So far, Chung-aran always felt that the words had other meanings, which made him vaguely uneasy. Chung-aran couldn't hide the uneasiness in his heart at this time, so he showed it in front of Li Zifeng. "I don't know what you want to say." Li Zifeng took a deep breath. "Iran, Hongguan told me something when you were drifting in Beijing." "Hongguan?" Chung-aran was stunned and subconsciously said, "Could it be?" It turned out not to be about the guitar, but if it was about the thing when they were drifting in Beijing, then Li Zifeng nodded. "Yes, he told me that you had done something wrong and that you had stayed in the detention center for a few months. He actually told you." Chung-aran suddenly interrupted Li Zifeng. "He actually did this." "Why?" There was a trace of anger on Chung-aran's face. He didn't want to think about the past, and they had promised not to mention it. But this promise was broken like this. Hongguan, just because I had the chance to realize my dream, you became like this, ignoring the previous promise?" Chapter 453. Li Zifeng gave Chung-aran a cup of hot water. Chung-aran had been silent for some time. Li Zifeng saw that he had digested most of the information, so he took advantage of the time and said regretfully, "I told you, people change sometimes." Chung-aran frowned and squinted his eyes. Li Zifeng sighed again. He refused the job in the TV station. It seems that he is not satisfied. I feel that he still wants to have a good opportunity to develop himself. He thinks that he is not worse than you. I mean, he should also want to debut. How could he debut? Chung-aran suddenly got angry. He didn't know where this anger came from. He even said without thinking, "He is worse than me. It's impossible." But Chung-aran soon calmed down and felt that what he said was too much. Meanwhile, he looked at Li Zifeng and said uneasily, I didn't mean to hide it from the company." Li Zifeng said kindly, "It doesn't matter. I want to talk about this kind of thing casually. After all, it's not a glorious thing. But you don't need to worry too much. Many stars have some messy things before their debut. I've seen a lot of them. Don't worry, I know how to deal with it, and I can handle it well. Who are we? We exist specifically to deal with these matters for you. Is there really no problem? Chung Yiran asked anxiously. Li Zifeng said seriously, You don't believe me, but you have to believe in the strength of our company. The company's crisis PR is not just for show. Moreover, we want you to be popular. What's the benefit if we don't let you be popular? Chung Yiran was silent. For the entertainment company, the most important thing was that their artists were popular. Li Zifeng said seriously, But since some things are out in the open, I'm not afraid to be the ugly one. You let me deal with this matter, so you have to trust me and give me full authority to deal with it. And you can't have any contact with Hongwan anymore. You don't even want to change your guitar. He patted Chung Yiran's arm and said softly, I know you are a person who cherishes old friendships, so I'm afraid you will be soft-hearted. But you have to understand that some people value your soft-heartedness, so they have something to rely on and want a yard after getting an inch. If you are willing to talk with him, it will only make him feel that you are still thinking about him and won't let him go. You see, he even exposed your past. What else can he not do? If he is shameless, there is no need to worry about anything, right? What? What are you going to do? Chung Yiran hesitated. Li Zifeng said, You don't worry. We won't do anything illegal. However, in this line of work, there were always some other effective methods. But I promise, we won't do anything too extreme. After all, we don't want to make trouble, right? I think Mr. Hong is just a little bit unbalanced. As long as we give him enough compensation, he won't really make trouble. After all, he won't get anything even if he makes trouble, right? Seeing Chung Yiran still hesitating, Li Zifeng said softly, Yiran, the time of your debut show has been fixed. If this matter distracts you and you perform badly, it will be a fatal blow to you. You have to think clearly about your future and your dream. A man should put his career first. Besides, as you said, Hongwan is a man who loves his wife. He doesn't want anything to happen to him and make his wife worry, right? I see. Chung Yiran took a deep breath and nodded. Then, I'll leave it to you. Li Zifeng gave a nice smile. Don't worry, I have the most experience in dealing with this kind of thing. You have a good rest, and I won't disturb you. By the way, I've arranged some relaxing activities for you. You can have a good rest. Chung Yiran gave a start. He didn't understand what Li Zifeng meant by relaxing activities. However, after Li Zifeng left, the door of the lounge suddenly opened again. An extremely tall and gorgeous woman with a seductive aura walked in gently. She closed the door and came to Chung Yiran slowly with a smile. Then she sat on his legs and cupped his face. The fatal tenderness opened up all the male cells in Chung Yiran's body, making him breathe rapidly. The boss's finger tapped on the club's counter gently. Then a light screen of about 22 inches projected in the air slowly disappeared. The final picture of the light screen was that a man and a woman were about to fall into the vortex of the most primitive impulse. That day, the boss of the club said that he wanted to drink something, so Miss Maid specially made some new cocktails. It was pleasing to watch Yi shake the snow pot. The light blue wine was slowly poured into a fixed cup, and then Miss Maid used tweezers to pick up ice cubes and put them in. Every movement was natural. Ding! The ice cubes made a sound in the cup. Yi slowly pushed the finished product to Luochio. Master, it's done. Yes. Luochio smiled, but didn't pick it up to taste immediately. Instead, he suddenly said, I was just thinking, is Li Zifeng actually the messenger of our club? Seeing Yi just smiled, Luochio said with a strange expression, It's quite interesting. Yi said indifferently, Instigation is the most common means of human beings, because instigation is the easiest way to profit. Since Li Zifeng wants Chung Yiran to completely trust him, of course, he needs to sacrifice something else. Luo Chio suddenly said, I suddenly thought of something. If it was a few years ago, when I was still a high school student who didn't know anything, I would probably severely criticize the dirty adult world. Master, don't you like this Li Zifeng? Yi asked softly. Luochio finally tasted Miss Maid's work. He stopped the taste in his mouth and stopped his sight on Yi. No, I think his face is more real, Boss Luo said softly. It represents a part of the truth. With that, Luochio took out some of his new work from his cup and sent it to Yi. Drink with me. I'll let you know what the taste is. The boss gently brushed his finger across Miss Maid's lips, giving her a brief taste that could reach the soul of her artificial body. It's sweet. Chapter 454. Hong Guan came to the hospital as usual, but to his surprise, when he came to the public ward, he didn't see his wife, Jean Ziao. Hong Guan thought that his wife might have gone for a checkup or to the toilet. But looking at the quilt that had been folded on the bed, Hong Guan had a feeling of uneasiness. Even the daily necessities here couldn't be found. For a moment, Hong Guan was completely panicked. He ran out of the corridor without thinking, grabbed a nurse and asked, "Oh, Jean Ziao. She was transferred to another ward early this morning." Transferred to another ward? Hong Guan was stunned. Yes, she was transferred to a single ward on the 9th floor. Hong Guan went all the way to the 9th floor with doubts. Of course, it wasn't the floor where the public ward was originally located, but another floor. In short, it was a place for rich patients to stay and recuperate. In front of the door, Hong Guan calmed down, then pushed the door and entered. He couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the layout of the ward, which was not worse than that of a high-end hotel room. Of course, he did see Jean Ziao. In addition to Jean Ziao, he even saw another man, Li Zifeng. "Mr. Hong, are you satisfied with this single ward?" Li Zifeng always greeted people with a smiling face. As the saying goes, don't slap a smiling face. Not to mention that Hong Guan had already passed the age of impulsiveness, and his wife was here, so he wouldn't do anything. Hong Guan smiled and nodded to Jean Ziao, who was sitting on the bed in the ward and looking at him. Then he closed the door of the ward and came to the elevated floor of this floor to talk to Li Zifeng formally. "I don't understand why you do this." Hong Guan frowned. "Mr. Hong, don't you want your wife to get the best care during the delivery period?" Li Zifeng smiled and said, "There's a single nurse to take care of her 24 hours a day, and there's also a special doctor to check the ward on time. And I think your wife likes it very much." What did you say to my wife?" Hong Guan's eyes suddenly became angry. Li Zifeng said, "What did Mr. Hong think I would say?" "Don't worry, I didn't say anything. I just said that it was Iran's idea. Then tell your wife not to tell you about the transfer and give you a surprise." Hong Guan doubted. "Is this really Iran's idea?" Li Zifeng said, "Of course. Otherwise, who would give you 100,000 yuan for nothing? Who found you a job? Who gave you a single ward? To be honest, Mr. Hong, you and I are not related in any way. Do you think I will do these things for you? I was only asked to do this by someone else. You don't have to make things difficult for me. Mr. Hong, the money and the job are still valid. You just have to nod your head, and you'll get them immediately." Hong Guan shook his head. "I don't understand. I never asked for these things. Why did he give me these things? Also, why didn't he look for me personally? Why did he send you?" Li Zifeng said, "Mr. Hong, let's not beat around the bush. What Iran means is that if you have any difficulties, you can ask for his help. But he won't see you personally, so he hopes you won't look for him again." He really said that? Hong Guan suddenly grabbed Li Zifeng's collar. "Make it clear." Li Zifeng didn't push away Hong Guan's hand. He just said seriously, "Mr. Hong, different industries have different rules. Since Iran chose this industry, he must make some decisions and give up some things, especially the things that are not good for him. You may not know how important a public figure's image is, but we all know it. I think Iran has gradually understood it, so I must not be surprised when he makes such a request of me and asks me to help him. On the contrary, I think this is the right choice." Hong Guan's face was dejected. At this time, Li Zifeng suddenly opened his handbag and took out a document. "Mr. Hong, here is a confidentiality contract. I hope you can sign it. The content is very simple. Mr. Hong, you must promise not to disclose Chung Iran's past in any way. No matter who asks you, you can't answer. In addition, you can't contact Chung Iran in any way. Otherwise, you will be held responsible according to the content of the contract. Of course, since we asked you to do this, we will give you enough compensation. 300,000 yuan, a job in the TV station, and your wife's hospitalization fee." Hong Guan took the contract, glancing at it quickly. Then he angrily patted Li Zifeng's chest. "Why? What is this? Cut off the relationship? Tell me, what does Chung Iran think of me? Ask him to come out and tell me clearly. He has the guts to do this, but he doesn't have the guts to see me. Mr. Hong, why don't you leave us the last bit of friendship? Li Zifeng was not angry. Instead, he said in a slow tone, think about your wife. She followed you without any complaints. Have you given her anything? You can't even provide her with a good ward, and she is pregnant with your child. This directly hit Hongguan's weak spot, making him unable to say anything. Li Zifeng took out a pen, 300,000 yuan, a good job, the best ward, a healthy baby, and all the expenses. Mr. Hong, you can get it just by signing. You should be able to weigh the pros and cons. Hongguan took a deep breath and suddenly grabbed Li Zifeng's pen. Chungaran, Chungaran. What a good Chungaran. You have guts, you have guts. Hongguan quickly signed his name on the document. Don't worry, since I've signed this document, I won't say a word about it, and I won't mention anything bad about him. But you can tell him that in this life, we are complete strangers. I don't want the money, and I don't want the job either. As for the hospital treatment fee, just treat it as if I borrowed it. I, Hongguan, have hands and feet, and there will be a day when I return it. You can tell him that in this life I, Hongguan, have recognized the wrong person. With that, Hongguan threw the signed document in front of Li Zifeng, turned around, and walked away. Li Zifeng chuckled but squatted down and picked up the document on the ground page by page. He said to Hongguan's back, Mr. Hong, whenever you want money or a job, just give me a call. But Hongguan didn't turn back. Hongguan, you bastard. I mistook you for someone else. In Chung Iran's roar, Li Zifeng was baptized by the pages of the document again. Li Zifeng looked at the scattered pages of the document, then squatted down and picked them up one by one. His face didn't show any anger after being humiliated, but became calmer. Li Zifeng stroked the pages of the document with his fingers, then said slowly, Iran, it's clear. Li Zifeng pointed to the beginning of the contract. Look, this contract indicates the party A and the party B. The party A is Hongguan, and the party B is you. The party A promises to the party B that it won't tell anyone about that thing, but the party B must pay 2 million in cash and all the expenses of the party A's wife during the hospitalization period. If the promise can't be fulfilled, the party A will unconditionally disclose the fact that the party B has a criminal record and has been imprisoned to the media. Li Zifeng turned to the last page, pointing to the party A's position. Look, the party A signed, Hongguan. Is this his handwriting? Chung Iran waved his hand and slapped it away. Take it away. I don't want to see it. I get angry when I see it. But this is his request and final negotiation. Li Zifeng sighed. Even if you don't like it, you're the passive party. Chung Iran suddenly kicked the tea table. I don't have 2 million to give him. Where can I find it for him? Although he was highly valued by Fei Entertainment, he didn't sign a formal contract until now, but only a simple training contract. To put it bluntly, it was the condition of an intern. In my opinion, you don't need to worry about the money. Li Zifeng patted Chung Iran's shoulder. I'll find a way to pay for you. What? Chung Iran gave a start, frowning. Why do you want to help me? Li Zifeng smiled. Because you and I have the most solid relationship, and we're brothers of interests. Chapter 455. Chung Iran stared at Li Zifeng, as if she wanted to see through this person thoroughly. At this time, Li Zifeng smiled and said, Yes, because I personally discovered you. I naturally want to see you become famous. I also hope you can earn a lot of money. Li Zifeng paused and said pleasantly, Only the higher your achievement, the more you earn, the better I can be. Iran, we're not brothers who have gone through hardships, but we are definitely brothers who share benefits. He began to persuade. The truth is very simple. If you are good, I will be good too. Why should I help you? That's because I'm making an investment in you. And I'm investing in you so that I can get enough rewards from you in the future. So, do you think I'll just watch you fail? No. Chung Iran had to admit that Li Zifeng's words were reasonable, and he really did this for the sake of benefits. What was laughable was that this kind of capital-benefit relationship seemed to be much more important than the brotherly relationship between him and Hongguan. Chung Iran smiled bitterly, then nodded and took a deep breath. Li Zifeng, you helped me this time. I will never forget it. You're right. Only the relationship of benefits is the strongest. I won't let you down, and I won't let you feel that your investment is a failure. Chung Iran suddenly had a strong self-confidence. Wait for it. I will conquer everyone in the first performance. I like this kind of ambition of yours. Li Zifeng laughed and then patted Chung Iran's shoulder. You have a good rest. I'll deal with the following things thoroughly. Then, from tomorrow onwards, work harder and continue to study well. I'll wait for you to become famous in the future and pay me back the 3 million. Chung Iran said indifferently, sure. Not long after Li Zifeng left, Chung Iran's room door was opened again. Today, it was another woman with a completely different taste. This woman was extremely teasing. Perhaps it was because he was really upset, or perhaps he really wanted to vent something, or perhaps Hongguan let him see clearly what a so-called brother was like. Chung Iran crazily grabbed the unknown woman in front of him and threw himself on her like a beast. Listening to her delicate moans, a trace of pleasure began to invade all the nerves in his body. Gradually, he sank into this tenderness. The room was filled with the high-pitched sounds of men and women. Of course, the room's soundproofing conditions were excellent. Unless one's ear was pressed against the door, one would only be able to hear a little bit of movement. But Li Zifeng could not only hear it, but also see it clearly on his mobile phone screen. In the office, Li Zifeng narrowed his eyes, showing a cold smile. He chuckled, flicking his finger on the mobile phone screen, and then turned it off. 2 idiots. Li Zifeng suddenly patted his cheeks and then looked at the glass window behind him. Li Zifeng began to adjust his expression slowly. Don't eat in such an ugly manner. But Li Zifeng couldn't see the glass window. Outside the 20-story glass window, an old face was looking at him. An old face with an afro. A newcomer of a club, Black Soul Envoy. If the modern internet terms were used to describe, Taiyinzi could be described as 10,000 alpacas mating crazily in his heart. Was he going to break the sky? Was he going to kneel on the keyboard? Would the boss ask him why he was kneeling? Who was the real Black Soul Envoy? Li Zifeng. Which Black Soul Envoy are you pretending to be? Why are you so skilled? Can you teach me? Bah! But, according to the boss's character, he won't like it. That is to say, Taiyinzi pondered, not noticing that a crow flew over behind him. After the crow flew over, the more Taiyinzi thought about it, the more he felt the pain in his balls. Damn it. That is to say, I can't do anything good this time? Even if he gave up being the #1 Black Soul Envoy, even if he didn't want to be the most popular person beside the boss, he still had his dignity. A Black Soul Envoy couldn't even compare with a cunning human. It was too shameful. F***, no. I have to do something. Taiyinzi turned around abruptly. Everything he did was to defend his little position. There was a perfume lily on the vase. This was one of the flowers that old lady Zhang liked. In addition, in the last 1 or 2 weeks, it seemed that all kinds of flowers could be found. Because this city once had a marvelous scene of hundreds of flowers blooming together in one night. After the earthquake and the sinkhole appeared on the riverbed, it was like spring came back. Zhang Qingrui held the flowers with both hands, letting them spread out more naturally, then turned around to look at her grandma with a smile. Zhang Lilinfang was frightened by the rat tide that day, so she fell down carelessly. The old lady was old. A simple fall could cause serious problems. For example, this time, the old lady fell down and fractured her bones, so she had been recuperating in the hospital for a few days. You don't need to accompany me every day. Zhang Lilinfang looked at Zhang Qingrui with a kind face. It's okay. Zhang Qingrui smiled, sitting beside Zhang Lilinfang's bed, and started to peel oranges carefully. Uncle sure will take care of the company, and there's nothing urgent in Guyuzhai. Recently, the courses at school are not intense, and I haven't been to school for several days. Didn't you always say that you need this little bit of freedom? Zhang Lilinfang suddenly asked. Zhang Qingrui smiled. I thought about it when I didn't have it, but now that I'm in it, I don't have that kind of yearning. Is it because there's only one person left? Zhang Lilinfang laughed. Zhang Qingrui knew what her grandma was laughing at. It seemed that not only her grandma, even Uncle Sure had some strange misunderstandings, that there was a special relationship between her and her strange classmate. But Ms. Zhang knew that the reason why she paid attention to this special classmate was not because of the affection between girls, but something else. But how should she tell her grandma? Should she tell her grandmother that the owner of the mysterious black card that the Zhang family had been keeping all these years was the male classmate Luo Qiu, whom her grandmother and Uncle sure thought they had investigated thoroughly? She heard that he had chosen to drop out of school. Zhang Qingrui hadn't seen this mysterious classmate for several months. Of course, for Ms. Zhang, who knew some things, it was not something interesting whether she saw him or not. "Oh, how's the new company?" Zhang Lilinfang suddenly asked. The old lady sensitively felt that her granddaughter was absent-minded at this moment. But Zhang Qingrui started to manage the business of Guyuzhai when she was young. After several years of training, she not only had much calmness than her peers, but also had the ability to do two things at the same time. "Not a big problem," Zhang Qingrui calmly responded. "I've seen the plans sent by Zhong Luochun, and he did it better than I imagined. I can't find any fault. Maybe it's because I don't have enough experience." The people of the Zhong family are quite capable, Zhang Lilinfang said indifferently. "It's natural that you can't find any fault. Zhong Luochun has been sent to different places by old Zhong to accept some marginal and unimportant business each time. Actually, it's to train his skills. Although the eldest young master of the Zhong family takes over the leading enterprise of the Zhong family and seems to have great power, in fact, old Zhong loves the second young master more." Zhang Qingrui frowned. If Zhong Luochun makes some achievements with the help of the new company, it may cause the internal strife of the Zhong family. In that case, it's equal to us interfering in the competition for the successor of the Zhong family. "Grandma, I don't understand. Why do we have to get involved?" Zhang Lilinfang said indifferently. "I have my own plan. You only need to keep an eye on Zhong Luochun's operation of the new company. Remember, don't let him make you a mere figurehead. Ever since old man Zhong got better, the feeling Zhong Luochun gave me was different from before. If he used to be a God's favored son, an almost perfect gem before being polished, then now he's a smooth and restrained jade after being polished. But it's a pity that it's turned into the king green." "Grandma, you mean politics?" Zhang Qingrui was stunned. Zhang Lilinfang suddenly said seriously, "He's a person who can do great things. Rui, don't you want to consider it?" Zhang Qingrui shook her head, saying softly, "Oh, I prefer freedom." Zhang Lilinfang didn't say anything. She just looked out of the window, silently. The fragrance of the perfume lily reminded her of the days when she longed for freedom. "Close the window, I'm a bit cold." Chapter 456. In fact, most of the time, life doesn't cause waves. In other words, our lives have always been peaceful, waiting for the occasional wave. After it calmed down, it made people feel that life was not really peaceful like stagnant water. Because there have been waves, when it is peaceful, you will find that the lake water, which is as flat as a mirror, has a unique beauty. In other words, you will cherish the peaceful life more, right? Calmly and blissfully, he slowly waited for the birth of a little life. Hongguan had never felt so fulfilled in his life before. He still works in the garage, but he always takes time to ride a borrowed electric car to the hospital at noon. He will wash the oil on his hands with alcohol before work, not because he is afraid of being laughed at in the hospital's VIP ward with a dirty appearance, but because he doesn't want his wife to feel how tired he is. He hasn't seen Li Zifeng, nor did he take the initiative to find this person. He only knows that the hospital has never asked him for various fees. Jin Xiao would say that he must thank that good brother of his very much. Hongguan said that he is very busy now and can't spare time. He will wait for a chance in the future, but he has already signed the agreement, and he intends to abide by it. So in the future, he will probably have to wait for a long time. His wife said, "Okay, but when the child is born, I have to ask the godfather to see it, because the matter of the godfather was something that they have agreed on a long time ago." Hongguan will only smile, because he can only smile, because he is afraid that Jin Xiao's baby will be affected. Walking in the cold air of the winter night, what floats and what is stepped on are all dreams. In the evening, in the big square that is always bustling, Hongguan is still holding his small stall. Of course, the daily income is not much, but he can always get some. But he didn't meet the young man who used to come often, since that strange young man didn't give him a reward. Sometimes Hongwan can't help but think that maybe the young man who listened to his songs silently every time really understood what he was singing. Is it because of disappointment that he doesn't come again? Hongwan felt that even so, life still had to go on. Even though he was no longer here, his life still had to go on. On the big screen in the square, a TV commercial was playing. It was a preview of a certain program. Hongwan didn't see it, but he knew that he was in the trailer. It was the scene of a newcomer debuting. Perhaps they were already recording a program? What was the opportunity that brought you into contact with music? In front of the green screen in the two-person recording studio, the host was interviewing Chung Iran. These interviews would be edited and added to the opening of the program on the night of the premiere. I've loved music since I was a child. This was the draft that Li Zifeng asked someone to write. Chung Iran didn't seem nervous when facing her first shot because they had already communicated before the recording. Feiyun Entertainment invested a lot of money, so the host naturally wouldn't be careless in his interview with Chung Iran. In a society where everything depended on money, these permanent faces in front of the screen knew how to speak better than anyone else. It was an almost artistic technique. Do you feel pressured? You're the only newcomer in this program, and the others are all seniors for you. Of course, I'm nervous, but I'm more excited. Chung Iran answered fluently. Especially the seniors invited this time are all my favorites. It's an opportunity for me to compete with so many favorite singers. Mr. Chung, I heard that before you were discovered by Feiyun Entertainment, you had been singing in bars and nightclubs. Is that true? It's true. Chung Iran nodded. This was also a planned question. I'm very grateful to my current company. If it hadn't discovered me, I'm afraid I would still be a daydreaming boy. Gold will always shine. The host smiled. As long as you don't give up your music dream, I believe that not only you, but also more people like you will find their own path. Mr. Chung, thank you for coming this time. You're welcome. Well, this challenge of super newcomer is over. In the next episode, we will interview. The host made an okay gesture, and the program ended here. In the recording studio, Li Zifeng came to Chung Iran with great satisfaction. Of course, he also began to be polite with the host. After that, Li Zifeng said, "Let's go. I help you make an appointment with the chief writer of the entertainment section of New Monday. You have to do a text interview today." Chung Iran didn't even have time to eat. To be precise, he just had breakfast today. Although he ate some bread and other things on the way, he didn't really stop to rest. The life of a newcomer who was about to make his debut was far more busy than he could imagine. Chung Iran found that he hadn't played the guitar properly for 2 days. Tomorrow, he even had to participate in some warm-up activities. Only the day after tomorrow, when he started to record his first single, he would have a chance to touch the instrument properly. Pop! That was a pink bubblegum. After the bubblegum broke, the business was also very good. After chewing the gum until it was tasteless, another ball that was almost as big as his face was blown into the air. He repeated this over and over again, and the person who was chewing on the bubblegum was also looking at the big screen in the square at this moment. The person who chewed the bubblegum knew a lot of Chinese. She could understand but not speak well. There is such a program here. It seems to be called Singer. I heard that this country likes to import. It's true. This is a very popular music program in this person's country. My former motherland, huh? After this mission, should I go back and have a look? She talked to herself, but she didn't seem to care about other people's gazes. Even in other people's eyes, this person looked so strange. She had short white hair and was wearing a black leather jacket with three-quarter sleeves, but it wasn't the usual style of leather jacket. She also had long pants and boots that weren't commonly seen. Everything looked so different, as if she was a woman who was cosplaying. A woman in her 20s who was cosplaying, wasn't she? If it wasn't for the fact that he was playing cosplayly, this would have been too abnormal. The woman carried a slender tube on her back, like the kind of tube used by artists to carry their drawings. Maybe there was a DSLR hidden nearby shooting? There's no blind spot. Just take a picture and it'll be a wallpaper. However, the moment the flash lit up, The voice that rang out did not come from the cameraman, who was probably hiding somewhere nibbling on a drumstick. Instead, it came from a passerby who could not help but reach out to take a picture. However, when the passersby opened the photo album on their mobile phones to enjoy it alone, they found that they only took a blurry shadow. That's weird. I clearly turned on the shockproof mode. But the white-haired cosplay woman had disappeared. Later in the evening, Miss Maid was tidying up outside the club. This should be her last job of the day, to clean the place. But when she heard the footsteps behind, Yu stopped and turned around. A white-haired woman in strange clothes slowly walked out from the dark. The woman put her hands in the pockets of her leather jacket, chewing the bubble gum. Is this place closed? Yu smiled. This place is always open for guests who need it. Chapter 457. No matter if it was a man, a daughter, a child, or an old man, as long as they were customers, the boss always liked to secretly size them up. Luaccio also had a part of ordinary people's thinking. When he saw the female customer blowing the candy, he naturally thought that it was cosplay. Cosplay, right? I heard that everything is sold here, right? The woman who was blowing the candy asked straightforwardly. But before she asked, she sat down like a man. She was quite handsome. Her hands were still in her pockets, and her legs naturally stretched out on the floor. Purely from a biological point of view, this might be the second pair of legs with great attraction that Luaccio had seen. It was straight and slender, as if it had been nurtured through the best calculations. One would not feel that it had an extra ounce of fat, only that it had rich elasticity. As for Boss Luo, the first owner with similar legs that he had seen was naturally the nun Miss Lamia's, whom he had met once in Romania. How can I help you, dear customer? This was not a customer who was accidentally attracted to come in, an ordinary person, but a person who came prepared and was not ordinary. Luaccio could feel the thing in the tube behind the customer's back. There was an extremely ominous thing inside. Even if it was contained, even if it was deliberately concealed, it could not completely conceal its demon-like whispers. It should be a knife, right? It was similar to the kind that Japanese samurai regarded as their life. Of course, samurai might call it a sword. The woman who was blowing the candy looked around. After the first question, the next words seemed to be a little different. This place is really weird, but it seems that there are only two of you. Oh, you don't seem to be a human. The servant girl was not angry, because she was not a real human being. She still politely served tea to the woman who was blowing sugar. But recently, there were too many customers who had this kind of tone. Last time, it seemed to be Su Zijuan. Luaccio smiled slightly, and the boss was not angry. It doesn't matter how many people there are, as long as we have the ability to fulfill the customer's request. You're right. The woman nodded, then smiled faintly and said, Actually, I'm just a little curious. She shifted her gaze from the boss to Yu Yi, then back to the boss. I'm curious as to what's so special about this place that those old bastards in the club are so afraid of it. Are you here on behalf of... Luaccio was slightly stunned. Are you here for the Michael Club? Luaccio didn't buy the woman's information directly, because the transaction hadn't started yet. Before that, Luaccio didn't have the habit of getting information from strangers immediately. He was always used to being in the unknown before the official start. No, I don't represent anyone. The woman shrugged and said casually, I'm just representing myself. Besides, I don't really like the term guest. So, you can call me Nero. Nero? Luaccio felt that it was even more interesting that such an interesting woman would have such a name. Tyrant of the ancient Roman Empire? No. I have nothing to do with this kind of ancient people. The female Nero shook her head and said, In the words of this country, even if you count the 18 generations of ancestors, you still have nothing to do with me. Okay, Miss Nero. Luaccio nodded. Since you don't represent the Michael Club, what do you want to buy? Nero took out a small bag from her clothes. It was a very small cloth bag, similar to the size of a brocade pouch. She threw the small bag on the table. I just want to buy the information of one person. This was not the action of the nouveau riche to symbolize her wealth, nor was it a deliberate action for provocation. It was a very natural action. It was like a hunter who had just come back from a dangerous area. After making money, he came to the place where he spent money, and he was bold and generous. And in this bag there were some souls. How is it? Nero smiled and said, "This is the Easter monster that I killed on the way. By the way, there's also a very disgusting human among them, because he has been showing off his wealth in front of me and wanted to get me to bed, so I killed him." Who asked you to cosplay? Don't you know that the cosplay circle has always been really messy? What's the name of the target? Luaccio glanced at the number of souls in the bag. 9 monsters and 1 ordinary human, which was not a small number. Cook. Chiolene. What kind of information? Nero said indifferently. Alive or dead? If dead, where's the corpse? If alive, where's the person? The most accurate place. Boss Luo was silent for a moment, suddenly reached out and took out the only human soul from the bag. Can I trade now? Is 1 enough? Nero asked curiously. Boss Luo smiled and said, I also want to earn more, but enough is enough. So you're saying that you're still flaunting the banner of fairness here? Luaccio didn't speak, but put the human soul on the cushioned plate brought by Miss Maid, and then said slowly, Miss Nero, the cook you mentioned is not dead yet. He's currently living in a tofu shop in a small town downstream of the city. Tofu shop? Nero was stunned. She obviously didn't expect it to be such a place. She said with a trace of doubt, curiosity, and distrust, although this disgusting human soul is nothing. But are you just saying it casually? This is real-time information. As for whether Miss Nero can find the person in this place in the end, we can't guarantee. Luaccio said indifferently. Then, isn't it too easy to earn your money? Nero suddenly sneered. She took out the tube behind her back and pressed it directly on the floor. The tube was trembling slightly as if something wanted to break out from it crazily. Bursts of hissing sounds sounded faintly. Boss Luo looked at the slightly rippling tea on the table at this moment and suddenly smiled. Miss Nero, the thing inside, is called Yama, right? Heh. Nero narrowed her eyes. Luaccio said softly, I think it's better to call you customer, or calling you by your real name is better than a title. Do you think so too? Miss Wayun? Nero's gaze seemed to be sharper, but her smile was more brilliant. Luaccio picked up the teacup and drank. When he put it down, he said at the same time, in addition, customer, we are only here to discuss business. Other things shouldn't happen. It's best not to happen. The teacup and tea cushion intertwined with a crisp sound of porcelain colliding, and the demonic whisper stopped at this time. The so-called Yama devil naturally stopped trembling and calmed down. Chapter 458. Nero habitually chewed the gum in her mouth a few times. She held the broken palm of the tube and began to move up slowly. Finally, she came to the top position and pressed the lid of the tube. The thing inside the Yama blade didn't belong to her in the first place. She had merely inherited it, but she had never been able to gain the Yama blade's approval. But even so, she had inherited the name of the tyrant and ranked among the 12 divine generals. Of course, in Nero's view, it didn't matter whether the 12 were divine generals or not. The current relationship was that this fierce blade was no longer fierce. It was so obedient that it reminded Nero of herself before she was 7 years old. Tofu shop, right? Nero suddenly stood up, carried the tube back to her back nimbly, and tied the strap. She always had a kind of rudeness that was interesting to Luaccio. At the same time, it would make Boss Luo subconsciously associate her with the image of a chivalrous woman in Jianghu. Probably this might be what Nero herself yearned for, something. By the way, if you don't mind the trouble, remember to keep these souls well. As if nothing had happened just now, Luaccio personally tied the small bag used by Nero to hold the souls. Although this bag can play a certain role in preserving them, it is too simple after all. Slowly pushing the bag in front of Nero, Boss Luo whispered, It is not easy to collect the souls. If you are too careless and let them weaken automatically, it will be too wasteful to reduce the value they should have. Nero took the bag in her palm, threw it casually, and caught it again. Just find more if they weaken. The world is full of fresh and redundant souls. Luaccio didn't say anything, just nodded and said, I think, Miss Nero, you will definitely be a very good guest. As the club said, it's best not to have any contact with you. Nero shook her head and said, "But I don't think it's a big deal. At least this is very convenient. I want to say that I will come again." "Okay." Luo Chio stood up and made a half bow. "Welcome again, guest." Nero stepped away with his hands still in his pockets. After she stepped out of the door of this magical shop, she suddenly had an interesting thought. The owner of this shop clearly had the terrifying power that could make even the fierce Yama unable to raise his head, but he still maintained an almost morbid humility in front of customers. He really was a person with enough self-control. Nero looked up at the night sky, then tilted her head to look at the tube behind her. She suddenly muttered, "If this kind of person gets angry, he will probably be very scary, right? How terrifying would it be?" Nero found that this was the first time in her 20 years of life that she had such an unimaginable thought, which made her body tremble strangely from head to toe. It was very clear, very direct. She knew that this was the feeling of fear. Thus, she asked curiously, "Can we destroy the entire club?" Suddenly, there was a burst of demonic whispers. That was the voice of the Yama in the tube. Generally speaking, it meant that it felt hungry and wanted to eat. After all, this was a fierce blade. When it whispered, it would always be accompanied by terror. But because she had not reached the state of true integration with it, Nero was not stingy with her words at this moment. "It's very fierce now, but it was like a cat just now. It's shameless enough." The demonic whispers seemed to be stronger. Yama seemed to be unhappy, but it was just shouting. Nero suddenly touched her stomach and muttered, "I'm hungry too. I really want to eat kimchi and rice soup." At this time, the tube shook more fiercely. Nero was stunned. Although she had not really reached the state of integration with it after getting it, she was at least familiar with this guy's temper and some subtle habits. It smelled the smell of food, or the food it liked. Nero looked thoughtfully in a certain direction of the city. This way, a group of little mice huddled together and finally quieted down. This day, it was only at this time that Shu Xiaoshu had time to rest. But she didn't stop for long before she started to do something again. For example, tidying up the house. In theory, being clean wasn't a good thing for rats, but Shu Xiaoshu was doing these things against her will that she wouldn't do in the past. If she cleaned up the house, she would definitely be scolded as a prodigal woman if Shu was still here. Shu Xiaoshu subconsciously covered her face with a rag in her hand, quietly sobbing. Suddenly, Shu Xiaoshu heard a sound outside the house. She instinctively opened the door and walked all the way up the basement stairs, but she saw nothing but the swaying shadows of trees. Was it the wind? "Mom!" Shu Cheese's voice came. The lid of the sewer next to her suddenly opened. Cheese, who was young but the oldest male in this family, climbed out quickly with a lot of things in his hands. Cheese's hand was holding some canned goods. There was even a used piece of real cheese. Of course, it was a cheese that had gone bad, or it wouldn't have been thrown away. "Mom, it's windy outside. Let me help you back." Cheese knew why Shu Xiaoshu came out. She always thought that there was someone outside. She thought that Shu was back, even if she only heard a little sound of a stray cat passing by. She kept saying that Shu was not dead and would come back. But Cheese recognized the reality faster than Shu Xiaoshu. Since he was driven away by Su Zijuan that day, he knew the reality better than anyone else. Shu Xiaoshu didn't say anything, just nodded silently. Cheese supported his mother and walked down the stairs step by step. "You really didn't see anything when you came back?" Before opening the door, Shu Xiaoshu suddenly grasped Cheese's hand and asked. Except for the shadows of trees, there was nothing. Cheese shook his head seriously. Then the door of the basement opened and closed. Without Shu Yu, the day of the rat monster's family came to an end. It was exactly 12 o'clock in the evening. At exactly 12 o'clock, a black shadow slowly crawled out of the eaves. Why did it crawl? That was because it was like a snail. Its body could be attached to the eaves and slowly wriggled. And there was some sticky and turbid liquid left after it wriggled. Under the faint light of the street lamp, it gradually crawled out, and its real appearance could be seen more clearly. Its head was almost twisted 180 degrees, like the head of an air-dried corpse. There were no pupils in its eye sockets, only two deep black holes. There were various pieces of flesh of different depths on its body. You could imagine that they were sewn with different pieces of cloth, but you couldn't find any traces of sewing. The joints in various places were abnormal, but there was a strong feeling of strength. At this time, it was eating something on its body. Why was it eating something on its body? That was because there were several strange and ferocious faces on its abdomen. Since there were faces, there were naturally mouths. It was the mouths of these faces hidden under its abdomen that were eating something. Geckos, moths, mice, cockroaches were chewing these small things, but it seemed to feel that it wasn't enough, and its body suddenly slid down along the wall. After it landed on the ground, it crawled on the ground like a snake by shrinking its body, even though it had different limbs that looked unusually strong. Finally, it crawled towards the stairs of the basement of the mobile building, faster and faster, faster and faster, faster and faster. Finally, it crawled to the stairs. It knew that after the door at the bottom of the stairs was opened, it could find more food, which was delicious. There was something in its body that kept telling it that the little mouse demons inside were delicious. But when it intended to climb down the stairs, some of its limbs were abruptly inserted into the mud, stopping its next action. It was like this again. Chapter 459. The uncooperative part of its body made it unable to continue climbing down the stairs because there were too many different things in its body. Before it could truly assimilate these things, it could not completely control its own body. In particular, it had suffered a huge injury not long ago, which made the originally difficult integration even more difficult. Just like now, if it were not for the hunger in every part of its body, it could not even move nimbly. It crawled to this place from afar like a snake, but now it was like a gecko climbing up the wall next to it and leaving. After leaving this place, the discordance of its body suddenly lessened a lot. But with the disappearance of the discordance, the feeling of hunger became more and more intense. Should it continue to look for food, as usual? Since it was severely injured last time, it was very clear that there were many things in this world that could hurt it. So it needed to be extremely careful, so that it would not be disturbed when it was looking for food, let alone be discovered by those who could hurt it. Wandering in the alley full of shadows, it began to approach another kind of food that could make it excited. Since it escaped last time, it discovered this kind of delicious food. What was more rare was that this world was full of delicious food, and more importantly, this kind of food was not difficult to obtain. This was a kind of food that had no resistance at all. For the time being, it did not know that this kind of food had a formal name of human, because so far, it had only acted on instinct. Yes, since it was created, it had always acted on instinct. And with this instinct, it quickly found a suitable prey. In the depths of the alley, the food that it thought could be easily obtained was lying on the ground at this time. It did not know that this kind of situation was called drunk on the street in the human world. What it did not know was that the humans who were drunk here had another name. Homeless. The head liked to bite off the head of this kind of food. The homeless did not even feel any pain. He might be having a beautiful dream under the influence of alcohol. After that, he would leave the world that abandoned him forever. After completely swallowing the homeless man's head, it covered the homeless man's body with its whole body. Every part of its body began to move. Suddenly, with a hiss, it felt as if something had peeled off from its body. After that, a great pain began to stimulate its nerves, causing it to let out a strange hiss. But the sound was not loud. No matter how painful it was still not loud. That was because its mouth part-like thing hadn't completely evolved. 2. Its body was broken into two. It was cut by something from the middle. The cut was like a piece of wood that was cut by a carpenter. But the split body was still twitching strongly. It didn't die. At this time, Nero slowly walked out of the alley. She glanced at it on the ground, and at the same time at the body of the homeless who was also cut in half. Finally, she looked at it. She had already arrived because Yama had smelled its scent. The reason why she did not act immediately when it was eating was that she wanted to lower its vigilance to a certain extent. As for the homeless life and death, since they did not know each other, why did it matter? Inner core. Nero suddenly waved her arm, and a cold light flashed on her hand, directly melting on the lower part of its body. Yama's fierce blade looked like a tachi. After being cut by Yama, this part of its body suddenly turned into a pool of pus and blood. Nero said indifferently, "Not here, then it must be in another part." She walked towards the remaining part of it that was hiding in the corner. She casually placed Yamato on the ground and dragged it behind her. The tip of the blade scratched the concrete ground like the sound of a butcher sharpening a knife. "Then you must be wondering why you were found, right?" Nero narrowed her eyes. "Because Yamato has eaten too many things like you. So no matter how hard you try to hide your smell, you can't escape from its senses." Its body suddenly shrank a little. "Congratulations, Yama." Nero sneered at this time. "I didn't expect to meet your usual food in this country. No wonder you were so excited just now. But this guy seems to be a little different from those failures you usually deal with." It seems that it used the Eastern monster as the material. Yama suddenly pierced into its body. "Let me see where your inner core is hidden." "Well, who put you together?" This technique is not the craft of the old bastard in the club who specializes in this kind of thing. "Is it cuck?" But Nero felt that it was not cuck, so she shook her head again, raised Yama, and pierced another place. Cuck should have no interest in this kind of thing. After being stabbed twice by Yamato, its body felt like it was about to completely collapse. It was originally not very coordinated, but now it was like a machine with a broken gear, completely paralyzed, and the only thing that could be seen was the fear that was constantly magnifying. But Nero suddenly shook her head. "It seems that it has not evolved to the third stage. It seems that it is impossible to get anything out of it." She unsheathed her Yamato and raised it high in the air. A purplish-blue flame slowly rose from the blade. "As usual, you can eat as much as you want except for the core that needs to be recycled." The blue and purple flame suddenly burst out. Yama was probably excited. "Alas, I can't get excited." Nero shook her head, and her arms slowly fell down. But in that split second, it suddenly moved. Something shot out from one of the faces on the remaining half of its abdomen. It shot toward Nero's heart ruthlessly. In a flash, Nero raised his Yamato and blocked in front of him. Only a few tinkling sounds were heard. The thing that shot at her was like a poisonous needle, like the needle behind a bee's tail. It resisted. Nero suddenly felt a little surprised. But what was even more shocking was that this thing's body suddenly turned into a puddle of pus and blood and quickly flowed into the ditch in the alley, escaping without a trace. "Ah, it escaped," Nero muttered expressionlessly. Then he put away Yamato, which was vibrating and emitting dissatisfaction all the time. "Well, just pretend that I didn't meet it. It's none of my business anyway." Thus, she picked up the long black tube and yawned. Then she put her hands in her pockets and left. Left, Yamato. "Didn't you say you would let me eat my fill?" The next day, Luaccio, who was frying eggs and bacon in the kitchen, had just sprinkled a little salt when he heard a hurried voice from the living room. It was Ren Xiling's voice. Ren Xiling, who had rushed into the kitchen, was still biting the rubber band in her mouth and tying up her hair. "What's the matter?" Luaccio asked casually. "I don't want to eat breakfast." Ren Xiling hurriedly picked up a piece of bread and bit it in her mouth. "There's news. Big news." The body of a headless tramp was found, and the rest of the body was cut in half and thrown in the alley. "It may be a perverted killer." Boss Luo slowly turned around. Ren Xiling widened her eyes at this time. "You also feel that it's very powerful." Luaccio shook his head. Ren Xiling blinked and said inconceivably, "Aren't you too calm? Aren't you surprised at all?" Luaccio said indifferently, "I just feel that it's amazing that you can still speak clearly while biting the bread." Ren Xiling. Sub-editor Ren directly greeted Boss Luo with her third finger, then rushed out of the door. So, how was he able to speak clearly while chewing on bread? How was he able to converse normally? Chapter 460. The white Santana stopped at the roadside. It was an emergency brake. Sir Mahaud's eyebrows suddenly jumped at this moment. He suddenly had an ominous feeling. Of course, it might be because he didn't have time to eat breakfast, so he was starving. Lin Feng, are you here?" Mahaud pushed through the crowd, only to feel that someone was coming to him from the side. Mahao didn't look at him and said, "Go, drive away these irrelevant people." And then Sir Ma, who had decades of experience as a policeman, recited a set of procedures without stopping. But Mahao unexpectedly found that the person coming to him was not Lin Feng. But even if it was not Lin Feng, Sir Ma didn't feel embarrassed. "What are you waiting for? Go to work." The policeman immediately said, "Sir Ma, we've done all the things you just said." "Done all?" Mahao was stunned. The policeman nodded, and then directly said, "A female police officer came just now. She said all the things you just said, so we did all of them." "A female police officer?" Sir Ma opened his mouth. Where did this female police officer come from? "Forget it. What else did she say?" "Nothing. It's almost the same as what you just said." Mahao said, "That's all? Didn't you say that no reporters are allowed to sneak in? Especially female reporters." "No." The policeman shook his head. "But Sir Ma, I'll go and do it now." Mahao immediately waved his hand, "Go." He didn't know what was going on. Did someone in the department come before him? But the number of female police officers in his department could be counted with 2 fingers. Sir Ma couldn't help shaking his head. He had to check the scene first. He crossed the cordon and arrived at the scene. But before he arrived, he could already hear the sound of shutters clicking. Mahao opened his eyes subconsciously, as if he had just woken up, as if he couldn't react in a moment. "Shit!" Mahao suddenly quivered, quickly walked up, and asked directly, You, how did you sneak in?" Of course, this was our sub-editor, Ren. After hearing Sir Ma's voice, Ren Xiling put down the camera hanging on her body, while adjusting the lens, and said without turning her head, "Old Ma, you're here. Have you had breakfast?" "Not yet." Mahao nodded subconsciously. "Alas, no. I'm asking you, how did you sneak in?" "I didn't sneak in." Ren Xiling quickly took a few more photos with her skillful movements. "I walked in directly. By the way, I've helped you pass down the order. And I know you haven't eaten, so I just asked Lin Feng to buy some food." "No wonder I didn't see that guy, thanks." Mahao nodded again, but soon found that something was wrong. His face suddenly showed an expression of confusion. "Oh no. Why did you tell them? You're not a police officer. I understand you caught Lin Feng and then sneaked in together with him, right?" "I can't see it." Ren Xiling finally stopped and looked at Sir Ma, nodding with gratification. "Old Ma, your IQ has increased. That's because you tricked me a lot." Mahao smiled happily, but still felt that something was wrong, very wrong. So he almost roared, "Ren Xiling, get out of here. Keep at least 10 meters away from the cordon." Mahao was determined to die, so he roared these words and was ready to argue with this lady. Unexpectedly, to Sir Ma's surprise, Ren Xiling was as obedient as a kitten and actually nodded. "Got it. I'm leaving now. I won't bother you. Contact me if there's any news." Seeing Ren Xiling really left the scene of the murder without looking back, Sir Ma was stunned for a while. "What the hell is this?" Sir Ma reacted again at this moment. "This woman has taken all the photos, so it's useless to keep them. It's better to look around and ask questions." At this moment, Lin Feng came in from the cordon, carrying a small bag of things, all of which were drinks and food. Sir Ma. But Lin Feng found that Mahao seemed to have something wrong at this moment. He frowned, and no one knew what he was thinking. "Sir Ma, did you think of something?" Lin Feng asked curiously. "By the way, where is Madame Run?" "Hey, Lin Feng, I want to ask you something." Mahao stared at Lin Feng very seriously at this moment. "Go ahead." Mahao took a deep breath and said, "It's not easy for me to come here, and I plan to do my best, but all the work has been done by you. I don't have to come out, does it matter?" "Of course." Lin Feng said solemnly, "You have to preside over the overall situation. But my scenes were all taken by Ren Xiling." Mahao angrily raised his third finger. "What else can I do?" "Eat." "How is it?" Mahao looked at old Qin, who also hadn't come out for a long time, with a serious face. Of course, old Qin wouldn't come out unless there was a particularly serious situation. After all, old Qin had a lot of subordinates. But this time, they encountered a headless corpse, and not only that, the upper body and lower body were separated. In a particularly serious situation, old Qin would come out. At the scene of the murder. Well, it's hard to say. Hard to say. Ma Howard was stunned. He rarely heard such an uncertain tone from old Sheen. That was to say, it was quite tricky. From the degree of stiffness of the body, we can only roughly infer that the time of death was between 1 and 2 o'clock this morning. Old Sheen stared at his colleague, who was fixing the body at the scene without any discomfort. But we didn't find anything similar to a murder weapon. In addition, other than the 2 fatal wounds on the deceased body, there were many strange wounds of different sizes. These wounds looked like they had been bitten by something. But the strange thing is that the bite marks of each kind are different. Something like a mouse? There are traces similar to that of a mouse, but there are more unknown bite marks. Old Sheen frowned, but the real fatal wounds are the 2 huge wounds. One is the position of the head, and the other is the waist of the deceased. I have preliminarily checked the wounds in these 2 positions. The wound on the neck is uneven, as if it was torn off by something like a saw. The wound on the waist is very neat and continuous, as if it was cut by an extremely sharp weapon in a very short time. Old Sheen shook his head. I have no way to distinguish whether the head was cut off first, and then the waist, or the waist was cut off first, and then the head. Further examination is needed. But no matter what the case is, one thing can be seen. Ma Howard nodded, looking extremely dignified. Whether the murderer and the deceased have hatred or not, this murderer's modus operandi is too cruel. Maybe he has a psychological disease. At this time, Section Chief, Sir Ma, come here. Old Sheen and Ma Howard hurriedly followed the sound, only to see an evidence collector squatting on the ground. Section Chief, we found some useful materials here. Old Sheen immediately squatted down, frowning. There was something like mucus on the ground, and it had begun to dry. Some parts had dried into gray powder. Old Sheen used a scraper to scrape up some mucus that had not completely dried, and then he sniffed it. His gaze followed the traces of the mucus all the way and found that it extended all the way to the mouth of the canal under the alley. Have you checked the canal over there? Old Sheen asked. Not yet. Take a look. Old Sheen said indifferently. Collect some of these liquids, including the dried powder, and take them back. Got it. Old Sheen stood up, suddenly looking at Ma Howard, frowning. Are you very free? Why are you still standing there? Sir Ma Howard looked around. I'm really free. You've done all the work, right? 3 times a day, on time every time, and the pain brought by each time was close to the limit of Xiang Lu's endurance. This reminded Xiang Lu of the experience when he was caught by the club decades ago and was cut into pieces for research. He hated that experience, but the irony was that it was because of that experience that he was able to endure the pain of going back and forth 3 times a day. Originally, enduring this kind of pain would cause one's body to be very weak, but in this spirit vein, the pain would be washed away very quickly. Then, he would use his full body to endure the pain brought about by the next curse. What the F***CK did he feel? Suddenly, Xiang Lu raised his head. Because this time the curse seemed to be much shorter than the previous ones. He naturally didn't think it was because the power of the curse was weakened. The reason was the source of the curse. Su Zijuan came again. The seal of the ley line belonged to her, so she could freely enter and leave this place. Su Zijuan easily came to the place where Xiang Lu was imprisoned, looking at him with a sneer. How do you feel these days? Thank you for your reward, Your Highness. Xiang Lu chuckled. But I'm afraid I'll disappoint you, Your Highness. I should be able to hold on, I think, at least before the next dragon rises. Su Zijuan narrowed her eyes. She was not looking at Xiang Lu, but at the chains that locked Xiang Lu. These chains seemed to break easily, but they could keep her out of Xiang Lu, so she couldn't kill him. Su Zijuan had already experienced it, so she naturally didn't want to touch these chains, at least not before she had no other way. In this case, strengthen a little more. This time, Su Zijuan directly bit her finger, squeezing out a drop of black blood in the air, and shot it into Xiang Lu's forehead. At this time, the black blood drilled into Xiang Lu's head. Seeing Xiang Lu's face slightly changed, Su Zijuan showed a shy smile like the girl next door, turning her body and her skirt, and then left with her hands behind her back. But just as they were about to leave, Su Zijuan suddenly looked back and smiled. It's 10 times. Ah! In just a moment, the pain was more than what Xiang Lu had suffered all this time. He even felt that his soul was being torn apart at this moment. Where have you been? Su Zijuan just returned to the pet hospital when she ran into Long Shura, who ran out to smoke. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. Su Zijuan said, "You have eye boogers." Long Shura also said, almost at the same time, "You have eye boogers." Humph. The two of them, who both had great statuses in the current demon world, snorted coldly and quickly turned around. They used their sleeves to wipe their eyes before turning around again. Almost at the same time, they also turned around and said with one voice, "You're blind." A strange atmosphere began to spread between the two of them. Usually, at this time, there would be a lively voice between them, stopping the two from clashing further. But this time there was no voice. Su Zijuan suddenly snorted, "I'm going to leave for a while. Watch that little guy closely. If I find you can't take care of yourself, or don't get fat when I come back, I'll tear down this damn hospital of yours." Longshaw suddenly said, "Since you value him so much, why don't you take care of him yourself? Why leave him to me? Aren't you the one who picked her up? I can always pick up several wild little guys all year round. If I have to take care of all of them, won't this become a nursery? Then you can leave her to fend for herself." Su Zijuan snorted. Longshaw suddenly sighed. "It's not easy to come back. Why do you have to go out again? Is it because your injury is better?" On one hand, Su Zijuan said indifferently, "I don't like to delay some things for too long. I also need to clean up some old accounts. Besides," Su Zijuan paused, looked around, and snorted, "the smell of smelly monkeys here is getting stronger and stronger recently. It's uncomfortable. Be careful. You won't die. Ha! Ha ha ha." In the Elysium, Brother Xiaosheng was holding a microphone and standing on the dance floor. "Ha! I'll give one to you after I get drunk." So the owner of the Elysium threw away the microphone in his hand and then jumped up. His legs were clamped on a black stick or something like a stick. Friction, friction, Brother Xiaosheng was dancing similar to pole dancing. Chapter 461. In the complicated sewer pipes in the city, a mud-like thing was wriggling slowly. Lin Sanju did not know where it intended to go. Anyway, it had been several hours since it started to squirm. It was the one that Nero said had escaped. But now, it had weakened to a certain extent. Originally, there were a lot of different parts in its body. These parts entered its body at different times. Some of them had been assimilated by it, while some still retained a part of their consciousness. For example, a part of the consciousness that prevented it from hunting the family of rat monsters living in the basement. However, it had been severely injured twice, especially the last time when half of its body had been chopped off and it had been stabbed twice by the Yama blade. It was like adding hail to snow. It even had a feeling that it was about to die. But after all, it was made from the never-before-seen Eastern monsters. Some unknown changes, perhaps even unknown to the creator of this technology, were occurring in its body at this time. "So tired. I want to sleep for a while." Its consciousness gradually became blurred, and this mud-like thing gradually stopped wriggling. The soft flesh even began to condense, harden, and finally become like dry cement. Somewhere in this dirty and narrow sewer, probably no one would find it. Perhaps it would be buried in this place like hardened cement. However, not long after it hardened, a cracking sound was heard out of nowhere. Crack, 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 crack. Finally, when the hardened material on the outside suddenly shattered, something seemed to be moving quickly in the dark sewer. In the end, only a sound could be heard from afar. It seemed that something was crawling quickly in the sewer pipes. A new thing. Shu Cheese pushed away a stone slab and moved a small gap, which was big enough for him to stick his head out. He skipped class, although he felt sorry for Long Shira. The monsters living in the city, especially the little monsters like him, who could transform and looked no different from human children, would get the help of Long Shira to go to human schools to learn. But Cheese had no choice. He needed to find enough food for his family. In the past, this was Shu Yu's job. Shu Yu, who lived in the city peacefully, had a hard-earned salary. But this salary was gradually not enough for the family's expenses. The main reason was that the rat monster's reproductive ability was too strong. This rat monster's family had a population explosion a few years ago. So Shuyu often had a stomachache because he often needed to find food in the sewers of the city to help his family. Sometimes, Cheese would follow Shuyu to find food in the nearby underground pipes or garbage stations. So, although he was young, Cheese was still experienced in this aspect. However, the source of living expenses was suddenly cut off. Relying solely on the treasure in the sewer pipes and the garbage station couldn't support the rations of the whole family. In particular, his mother, Shu Xiao Shu, still had a big belly, so she needed more nutrition. So Cheese began to set his eyes on a place where he could find a lot of food and nutritious food that was not rotten, the warehouse of the supermarket. Long Shuo clearly stipulated that monsters were not allowed to use their abilities to do evil in the human world, but there were so many monsters, Long Shuo and naturally could not control them all. Generally, the monsters relied on their own self-awareness. If there was a fluke mentality, then they would be lucky not to be found out by Long Shuo. Cheese did not care so much. Shu Yu's death had a great impact on him. At a young age, he began to realize that he had to take responsibility for the future of this family. Cheese moved the floor a little more and then let himself get out. It was not the first day he came to this warehouse. He dug a tunnel under the warehouse of this supermarket and then carried some canned food out of here every day. Of course, in order not to be found out by Shu Xiao Shu, Cheese would mix the fresh food with the food found in the garbage station every time. This time, Cheese aimed at the freezer of this supermarket. Frozen beef, mutton, and other meat. Cheese planned to take more meat home to nourish his mother's body. This time, Cheese left the warehouse without any difficulty. Holding a big bag of food, he calmly returned to the sewers. Suddenly, a sound attracted Cheese's attention, which made him feel something wrong. Then, a feeling of panic spread all over Cheese's body, which made him tremble all of a sudden. The food in his hand suddenly fell to the ground, and at this time, Cheese felt that his body was lifted up by something silently. A foul smell began to spread, which made Cheese realize what he had encountered at the first time. The owner of this place. Of course, it did not mean that the owner had the ownership of this place, but it could only be said that this was the owner's territory. Shu Yu's family was not the only rat monster in this city. There were different kinds of rat monsters living in the sewers of the city. When Shu Yu was still alive, she had warned Cheese more than once not to go to a strange place, and only to walk around near home. There were a lot of uncertainties in this city's sewers. Tut, what did I see? Whose child is this? Not only did it emit a foul smell that made Cheese, who was also a rat monster, feel, but there was also a gloomy and creepy voice. At this time, the stinking rat monster turned Cheese around and opened his mouth to release a strong, bloody smell. Cheese even saw some hair left in his teeth. That was probably the hair of the rat monster. This guy would kill his own kind. Tut, tut, tut. Do you know the consequences of trespassing in my territory? I don't want this thing anymore. Cheese shrunk his neck in horror. I promise, I will never come here again. But you have taken so much before, shouldn't you eat it? The huge rat monster's face suddenly became ferocious. Tell me, how should you compensate me? You already knew? Cheese was shocked. Was my action noticed from the beginning? The huge rat demon immediately laughed sinisterly and said, From the first time you stepped into my territory, I noticed you, but I want to know where you came from and who is the adult in your family. Now it seems that you don't have an adult in your family. Ha ha! Cheese struggled hard, but he couldn't shake off the rat monster's claws, the black and thick claws, as if they were made of fine steel. Let me go. Let me go. I know Lord Long. Let me go. Oh, you know how to make connections at such a young age? Not bad. The huge rat monster sneered, but you don't know that Lord Long doesn't like such a dirty place. She won't even come here. No matter how you shout, she can't hear you. Let me go. Cheese saw that the long straw didn't work, so he didn't want to wait for his death. At this time, he suddenly bit the rat monster's palm. But he didn't expect that this couldn't hurt the huge rat monster at all. Bang! Cheese only felt a huge impact in his body, and he saw stars in front of his eyes. It turned out that he was directly smashed down by the huge rat monster. "I like to eat babies like you. I will twist off your limbs, chew slowly, and then start to suck your blood. That taste, TSK, TSK." The huge rat monster's face had already smelled the back of Cheese's head, and he laughed more cruelly and excitedly. "Next is your head. You know, my technique is very good. I can slowly twist out your head with your spine." Ah! The huge rat monster had already grabbed one of Cheese's arms and began to exert strength slowly. Chapter 462. The shrill screams were especially loud in the sewer. Cheese's screams when he was being tortured. "Ha ha ha! Scream all you want. I like to hear screams the most. It's the best food. Ha ha ha! Ugh!" But at this moment, the giant rat demon's body suddenly flew backward and hit the side of the canal. Almost his entire body was about to sink into it. Facing the threat of death, Cheese, who was almost in despair, felt that the huge body that was pressing on him suddenly disappeared, and his arms were free. He hurriedly got up from the ground, only to see a figure appear in front of him. Was it this? Who saved him? Cheese didn't know the origin of this figure. He only knew that it didn't have the smell of a monster, but it had a huge and thick tail, and its body was dark green, and its head was like an insect's head. It didn't stand straight like a stooped old man, but its limbs gave people a feeling of super strength. Cheese had seen a movie about human beings before. If he used a creature in the movie to describe it, this thing was very similar to the alien in the movie. Even though it looked extremely weird, it gave Cheese an indescribable feeling, as if he had known this thing for a long time. "Who are you?" Cheese tried to ask, but this thing just looked at him and didn't intend to talk. Suddenly, this thing turned its head again and looked at the giant rat monster. The giant rat monster climbed out from the wall and rushed towards him, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. "What are you? How dare you sneak attack me in my territory? You're looking for death." Cheese closed his eyes instinctively. At the same time, he heard a shrill scream. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the giant rat monster's limbs had been cut open. On one of the arms of the thing that saved him, a horny object that looked like a sharp blade was ejected from its wrist. There was still blood dripping from it. Don't come over. However, this thing ignored him and arrived in front of the giant rat demon in an instant. It reached out and grabbed the rat demon's head. It lifted the rat demon's body and smashed it against the wall of the pipe. Bang! A loud noise, coupled with a huge vibration from the wall. The gigantic rat demon's head was directly pressed into the wall. The rat demon even lost consciousness in an instant and didn't make any more sounds. And at this moment, this thing actually mercilessly crushed the rat demon's head. Yes, directly crush it. Blood and brain matter splattered all over Cheese's face. This almost caused Cheese's consciousness to be in a completely blank state. The overly frightening scene had exceeded his ability to bear. At this moment, this thing suddenly opened its mouth and pressed down on the rat demon's body. It then squatted down and began to bite crazily. It was devouring the corpse of the rat demon. Cheese was so scared that he sat down on the ground. His hands and feet were cold, and he couldn't move at all. It seemed that after a short time, the huge rat demon's body had been completely swallowed by this thing. But even so, this thing didn't swell up at all. It squatted on the ground and suddenly turned its head. Its huge tail started to swing in the air along with its movement. In short, it looked at Cheese. "No, don't go." It crawled in front of him in a few seconds. Its mouth with the rat demon's flesh was almost in front of his nose. Cheese's body was almost stiff. He thought that he would end up like the giant rat demon and become the alien's food. But unexpectedly, this weird thing rolled up the stolen food that Cheese dropped on the ground and rolled it to Cheese. This is for me?" Cheese looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. This strange thing did not seem to have any intention of harming him. However, it did not speak. It did not even make a single sound. It simply scooped up the food and jumped away. In the blink of an eye, It disappeared into the complicated pipe. Cheese was so scared that he hurriedly picked up the food and ran away crazily without looking back. He would never dare to come here again. This year's club boss could be said to be the most unprofessional in history. Of course, for the current boss Luo, he could only compare with the previous one. But don't forget that the boss had the supreme status in the club. Even if he was unprofessional, the Black Soul envoys under him didn't dare to say anything. Not to mention Miss Servant Girl, who could respond to all the boss's requests and never refused. So Boss Luo didn't have a problem to accompany Yu Yi to the supermarket occasionally instead of staying in the club. Originally, Luochio was a child who often went to the supermarket. Because of the unreliable Run Xiling at home, Luochio bought everything at home. Well, this discount seems to be good. Holding 2 different boxes of beef in his hands, Boss Luo finally chose the discounted box, even though this box seemed to be smaller in weight. Master, this box doesn't seem to be fresh enough. But Miss Servant Girl, who was almost paranoid about preparing food for her master, raised a different opinion at this time. It doesn't matter. Luochio smiled. I believe in your cooking skills. Even if it's not fresh enough, you can still make a good taste. Besides, if you can't buy discounted food in the supermarket, you will feel uncomfortable. Of course, if it's vegetables, fresh ones are better. Yu Yi smiled gently. But Boss Luo, who was pushing the cart, suddenly slowed down, stopping in front of shelf and suddenly looking down. Looking at Luochio on the ground, he said softly, Yu Yi, do you think something will happen wherever I go? Because it's you, Master. Miss Servant Girl's answer made Luochio feel that it seemed to have a special meaning. Hey, doesn't this mean that I have the physique of a certain Grim Reaper? Suddenly, a slight vibration came. Boss Luo waved his hand casually. A bottle of canned food that was about to fall off the shelf due to the vibration stabilized itself. And just below the can, a little girl who was only 5 or 6 years old and holding a doll stared blankly. Wasn't this thing about to fall down just now? The little girl tilted her head in confusion and then seemed to see a big brother and a beautiful big sister passing by. But it seemed that they didn't pass by. Anyway, they disappeared all of a sudden. But soon she was carried up by her mother, and then she found that the people around the supermarket looked a little flustered, as if they were discussing something. Just now, was it a vibration? Seems like it. Could it be that another sinkhole opened up somewhere? No way. Wasn't there just one a few days ago? This isn't an earthquake zone. Alas. Damn it. Don't cut in line. Go back. Not long after the vibration, Boss Luo and Miss Servant Girl were strolling in the vegetable area. When they were looking at white onions in their hands, Luochio suddenly asked curiously, It looks a bit different. Well, this should be the one that Miss Nero didn't kill last night. Miss Servant Girl took the onions from the boss's hand and carefully broke off some of the dried parts before putting it into the shopping cart. Of course, Miss Nero can kill it, but it seems that she is too shameless. I feel that it's completely because she wants to watch the fun, right? The boss smiled and suddenly said, Have we ever sold this technology before? Miss Servant Girl recalled, We sold a biological gene fusion technology 30 years ago. It's not a monster. It's a new species. Boss Luo suddenly looked at Miss Servant Girl and smiled. I suddenly remember Adam in your laboratory. It was also created. I don't know if this electronic intelligence can evolve into a new life form in the future. Yu Yi shook her head. I didn't add this algorithm, so I won't. Luochio picked a few carrots and put them into the shopping cart and didn't continue this topic. Let's go. Let's see what else to buy. By the way, this Saturday, you can come to my house for dinner. Chapter 463. Shu Xiaoshu was very surprised to see Cheese's harvest today. It was not expired cans or open cans, but new ones and even a lot of frozen meat. She knew that this child had been out looking for food recently. Although she didn't want Cheese to do this kind of thing, this family had always been in a state of balance and no savings. If it weren't for Cheese, the other children naturally couldn't do this kind of thing. As for Shu Xiaoshu herself, it was even more difficult for her to move. Cheese, tell me honestly, where did you find these frozen meat? Cheese was very smart since childhood. When he heard Shu Xiaoshu's tone, he knew that his mother began to suspect him, but he had already thought about how to deal with it. So, Cheese lowered his head, trying not to let Shu Xiaoshu see his face, like a child who did something wrong. Mom, I'm sorry. I want to find Dad's former colleagues. Shu Xiaoshu was stunned. Cheese still lowered his head. The human uncles and aunts of the cleaning company, after hearing that Dad passed away, they all pitied me and gave me money. So, I went to buy food for you. Alas, my child. Shu Xiaoshu was both heartbroken and sad. She held the child with tears in her eyes. Mom, I'll cook the meat for you first. You have to eat more. Cheese changed the topic at this time. Even if you don't eat, the brother or sister in your belly also needs to eat. Good boy. Shu Xiaoshu sighed. It's hard for you. Mom, I'm fine. Cheese raised his head, revealing a big smile. I'm going to cook. My brother and sister haven't eaten delicious food for a long time. Go ahead. Shu Xiaoshu reluctantly showed a smile, and then returned to the room. In fact, it was just a corner of the basement separated by a curtain. The youngest daughter was still in the form of a beast and needed to be taken care of often. Seeing Shu Xiaoshu open the curtain and go in, Cheese frowned and then gently rubbed his arm. When the giant rat pinched here, his muscles and bones might have been hurt, but he could only bear it and didn't dare to make a sound. Cheese quickly took a deep breath, cheered up, and began to cook the meat in his hands. He prepared the food and helped his younger brothers and sisters eat it. Then he looked after Shu Xiaoshu. He didn't stop until Shu Xiaoshu and other younger brothers and sisters fell asleep. However, it was already close to midnight. Cheese left the basement alone and came to the open space in front of the old house. There were several cement pipes in the open space. Cheese sat on one of them, staring at the moon in the sky. How long would this kind of life? That supermarket. I'm afraid I can't go there. Tomorrow, should I look for another place? Or the food? Let's not go to primary school. Come on, Cheese. You're not a kid anymore. You have to take care of your mother and siblings. He silently said to himself. He said some things and principles that he could think of and comprehend at his age. Be strong. Cheese suddenly burst into tears. Be strong. He slightly shrugged his shoulders, hoping that he could have someone to rely on at this time, a shoulder that was not wide but could bring him safety. When he was very young, Cheese remembered that Shuyu often took him to this place and began to watch the moon and stars. There was no extra entertainment at that time, but Shuyu could always tell a lot of interesting stories. Suddenly, Cheese reached his collar and took out an iron whistle. This was a gift from Shuyu. These years, Cheese especially cherished this whistle, because Shuyu once said that if he was in danger, he should blow this whistle. Of course, that was when he and Shuyu were searching for treasures nearby. Cheese knew that if it was too far away, Shuyu couldn't hear it. How long had it been since the whistle was blown? In fact, it had never been blown, because Cheese never thought that there would be a day when he couldn't find his father. But the sound of the whistle, Cheese said to himself, it's really like the sound of a hummingbird. He blew the whistle again and again. Of course, he didn't dare to use too much strength, but just blew it gently. Cheese told himself that it would only be tonight. After tonight, he would never blow it again. It was useless, it couldn't make him strong, but would only make him weak. It was too late. Cheese also needed a rest. In less than 2 weeks, he seemed to have completed the transformation from a boy to a man, thinking of ways to become self-disciplined. But when he was ready to leave, he suddenly felt like there was a sound behind him. So he turned around instinctively. Ah! Cheese suddenly screamed. His body suddenly slid down from the cement pipe. He saw the thing that gave him a terrifying experience. But before his body fell to the ground, Cheese felt his body suddenly became stable. His body was rolled up by something and finally put down on the place where he was sitting. This was the tail of this thing. This was the weird thing that saved him from the rat monster in the underground pipe of the supermarket, and then left without saying a word. It squatted beside him quietly. Its hands just happened to be on the pipe, and the tail behind it was swaying gently, tilting its head. Cheese found that it didn't seem to be as scary as he imagined. You came for me? Cheese at this moment plucked up his courage, but didn't dare to get too close, asking carefully, who are you? It seemed that it couldn't speak. Cheese only saw that this thing's eyes made a clicking sound, opening and closing quickly. Did he understand? But did he not? Do you have a name? Cheese continued to ask curiously. This thing still didn't answer, but Cheese felt that it seemed to be staring at him, the whistle in his hand. Cheese was stunned. He subconsciously blew the whistle again and found that this thing had a reaction again. The tail behind it was swinging faster. Could it be? But how could it be? Cheese bitterly smiled and then shook his head. He glanced at this thing, and both of them looked at each other. After a while, Cheese tried to sit closer to it. How about, I call you Iron Whistle? Cheese suddenly said, well, you didn't say anything, so that means you agree? Iron Whistle blinked, as if to say, I can't speak. Iron Whistle. Ha ha ha. In a room in the forensic department of the Bureau. Section Chief Cheen, it's so late. Why are you still here? I'll deal with this. You can get off work first. Old Cheen didn't turn around. He just looked up from the microscope. Don't worry about me. Well, Section Chief, you take care of yourself. Section Chief Cheen was a well-known workaholic. Sometimes he even slept in the office, and the record was that he didn't go home for half a month. After hearing the door close, Old Cheen gently pinched his eyebrows and then shook his head hard. He seemed to be thinking about something, and then looked at the lens of the microscope again. It was zooming in on the strange mucus found at the crime scene during the day. What is this structure? Old Cheen muttered to himself. It's not a liquid at all. It's more like biological cells. Old Cheen's frown deepened. But after thinking for a while, he still couldn't get an answer, so he decided to do something to open up his own ideas. Old Cheen took a deep breath, putting on another pair of white gloves, and picked up the scalpel. He planned to do an autopsy overnight. Chapter 464. Question: will you be sold by your family? Yes. Of course, the word sell couldn't be used. It could only be called cheat. Luochio wasn't a narrow-minded person, but sometimes he couldn't help criticizing Ren Xiling's so-called idea. Didn't you say it's just a meal at home? If I didn't use this reason, would you agree? I haven't seen my future daughter-in-law since I came back from Louis Village last time. Don't you feel sorry for my hard work? Theme. Sub-editor Ren pulled Boss Luo aside, glancing at Yi, who didn't mean to follow them and was waiting there quietly. She whispered to Boss Luo, are you stupid? Of course, it's to build a good relationship with you. You can't feel that your future mother-in-law is a stingy person, right? So, this is the reason why you come to this restaurant? Luochio asked curiously. Let's review the scene. The location was the top floor of one of the few star hotels in the city, and it was also one of the few expensive restaurants in the city. Of course, apart from the taste of the food here, the selling point of the revolving restaurant in the air, with a 360-degree bird's-eye view of the city, was naturally the reason why it was expensive. Boss Luo, Yu Yi, and Ren Xiling were now in front of such a restaurant. As to why Luochio came here, Boss Luo could only conclude that he might have been cursed by a spell that was far more powerful than the ability of the club. She must have been bewitched by him. Don't worry, Ren Xiling said with a smile. You don't have to pay. The boss of the magazine rewarded me with a set of restaurant tickets for my hard work. But it doesn't include drinks. Anyway, you don't drink. What's wrong? You don't believe me? Ren Xiling had the urge to take out the tickets to prove her innocence. Unexpectedly, Boss Luo, whom she trusted unconditionally, shook his head. I don't doubt the existence of a ticket package. I'm just skeptical about the so-called gift. Ren Xiling's eyes widened in disbelief. Luochio, do you think I'm the kind of person who accidentally saw a set of tickets on the CEO's desk and knew that he was going to use it to pick up his lover? So I used it for the sake of his family's harmony? Let's go in. Boss Luo sighed. Wait, don't go yet. I'm helping you. And this is how you treat me? Ren Xiling's eyes widened. Luochio. Boss Luo went in, went out. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Ren Xiling walked to Yu Yi angrily. The servant girl was supposed to follow her master, but now she felt that it was better for her to stay and wait for Ren Xiling. Probably. Let me tell you. Ren Xiling directly held Yu Ye's arm at this time, almost whispering in her ear, my boy is born to be a blockhead. He doesn't know what romance is at all. You have to be more tolerant. But if you feel wronged, you must tell me. No matter how big the matter is, I'll make the decision for you. Do you understand? She already looked like an Andy. Yu Yi smiled slightly. Don't worry, he's very good to me. Alas, you too. Ren Xiling shook her head. I say, if you're so obedient, you'll be eaten alive in the future. It's okay. I'll always listen to him. Well, you think so too. Ren Xiling nodded with deep agreement, but suddenly found something wrong and said with a confused face, Wait, what did you just say? Yu Yi just smiled casually, walked forward, pulled the chair for Ren Xiling, and then said, Miss Lizzie, hello. Sister Ren, you're finally here. I'm starving. Sit down, don't stand. It turned out that Ren Xiling also called Lizzie. Everyone sat down, and the waiter came forward. Sir, do you want to order? Ren Xiling said at this time, Not now. Wait a minute. We still have people who haven't arrived yet. The waiter nodded, left the menu, and turned away. Luochio curiously asked, Why? Who else did you call? Was this really the ticket that the boss used to pick up his lover? You'll know later. Ren Xiling blinked and said mysteriously. But Boss Luo wasn't so curious. First, he didn't have any expectation for Ren Xiling's so-called arrangement. Second, because he smelled the smell of the sea and the smell of blue starflower. Ren Xiling suddenly looked around and then waved her hand hard towards the entrance. He saw a petite figure who seemed a little uneasy at this time, slowly walking in under the guidance of the people in the room. She was wearing a plain white dress with her head lowered. Except for a hair ornament, she didn't have any other jewelry. Everything looked so clean and pure. She was Louis Yiyun, the little girl by the sea. After Louis Yiyun sat down, Ren Xiling sat on the table, looking happy. Well, everyone is here. Do you feel it now? Actually, the main purpose of this meal was to celebrate Evian. First, it's to celebrate her college entrance examination. Second, it's to celebrate her new life. Speaking of this, Ren Xiling looked at Louis Yiyun apologetically. I'm sorry, I've been busy. We agreed to meet up, but it's been delayed until now. You won't blame me, right? Louis Yiyun quickly shook her head and waved her hands. The little girl was really embarrassed by this enthusiasm. Ren Xiling continued. The last thing to celebrate is to thank you for bringing us together at this time and place. This woman probably just wanted everyone to have a good meal and get together. I didn't know Sister Ren's simple meal would be in such a place. Louis Yiyun looked at Luo Chio anxiously, saying cautiously, I thought we were just having a meal in an ordinary restaurant. Did I dress too simply? As long as it's clean. Luochio said indifferently, Don't care about others' views. Got it. Louis Yiyun nodded obediently. She always subconsciously felt that the words of this young man, who was not much older than her, had the ability to make her feel inexplicably at ease. Holding the cup with both hands, Lizzie had just finished a cup of orange juice. She suddenly looked at this scene with interest and then smiled. Sister Ren, do you know how I feel when I look at Luochio now? How do you feel? Ren Xiling frowned, whispering to Lizzie, Let me tell you, I don't have a harem. Even if you have feelings, you have to hide them. What are you talking about? Lizzie didn't know whether to cry or laugh, and said with a smile, I mean, when I look at Luochio now, I feel he's like a parent. Yes, you're right. Ren Xiling patted the table in agreement, and said with surprise, This guy's like an old man. He doesn't know how to laugh. Should I just leave? Boss Luo was trying to think of a suitable reason. He was not used to this kind of occasion with so many people. Why did people always like to get together with a group of people? Luochio looked out of the window. The city was moving slowly in front of his eyes, and it was the prosperous time. He closed his eyes softly. In the distance, in the open space in front of a basement, Cheese and Iron Whistle were hiding in the cement pipe quietly. Only Cheese was talking, and Iron Whistle was listening. But time seemed to pass quickly. In the hospital, Hong Guan was hugging his wife gently, looking at the night outside, enjoying the little tranquility. Chung Aran was discussing with a group of staff, preparing for the live program on Sunday, that is, the next day. Sanair was cooking, and Mark was watching TV with Xiaoji. Zhang Qingrui was reading a book, and the old woman beside her was resting with her eyes closed. Chapter 465. Chi started to observe Iron Whistle again. Most of the time, Iron Whistle was motionless, Of course, Cheese couldn't see Iron Whistle most of the time. Cheese hadn't found a way to communicate with Iron Whistle, because Iron Whistle couldn't speak. But he felt that Iron Whistle might be able to understand him. Even though he and Iron Whistle usually met at night, Iron Whistle was still in his mind. In the evening, after Cheese finished his work at home, he would sneak out, and the cement pipe in the open space in front of the basement had become a secret base between him and Iron Whistle. Iron Whistle, where do you live? Iron Whistle, where do you go during the day? Do you hide here all the time? Iron Whistle, where do you come from? Why do you look so weird? Where's your family? Cheese had a lot of questions. In these days, he asked almost all the questions he could think of. Of course, he didn't get any answers. But strangely, Cheese didn't feel frustrated when he couldn't get an answer. Instead, he became more curious about Iron Whistle. Where did he come from? Why did he save him? He seemed to be able to respond to the whistle. Was it coincidence? By the way, don't you eat anything? Cheese suddenly asked Iron Whistle at this time. He hadn't seen Iron Whistle eat anything since he saw the scene of Iron Whistle swallowing the rat monster in the basement of the supermarket a few days ago. Of course, it was possible that Iron Whistle had eaten in the daytime when he couldn't see it. After the initial panic, Cheese found that he wasn't too afraid of the scene that day. Maybe it was because he was also a monster. Since he was young, she had taught him about the law of the jungle in the monster world. So Cheese was surprisingly receptive to it. Or maybe he just subconsciously felt that Iron Whistle wouldn't hurt him. Do you want to try this? Cheese fished out several pieces of jerky from his pocket and tried to deliver them to Iron Whistle. Iron Whistle stared at Cheese without any reaction. No, Iron Whistle had a reaction that Cheese didn't know about. Iron Whistle's flexible tail was moving on the ground. It moved to Cheese's back and lifted up silently. At the same time, at the very end of the tail, something as thin as a steel needle suddenly popped out. It looked like the tail of a scorpion. This extremely sharp little needle was slowly inching towards the back of Cheese's neck. It seems that you don't like to eat these. Cheese took back the jerky in disappointment. He rested his chin on his hands and looked at Iron Whistle again. Closer, closer, closer. This scorpion-like tail. At this moment, Iron Whistle's eyelids blinked rapidly, making a clear sound like a pebble hitting the cement road. Cheese suddenly felt something behind him and turned around subconsciously. The moment he turned around, his vision blurred. All he saw was a thick and long object shooting out of the darkness and out of the cement pipe. Iron Whistle's tail could also extend rapidly. It was much longer than what it looked like. Cheese couldn't help but marvel at Iron Whistle's ability. Then, Iron Whistle's tail came back from outside. At the end of its tail, there was a wildcat with black fur curled around it. The wildcat's body was completely stiff. At the same time, Cheese found that there seemed to be a small thing in Iron Whistle's tail that pierced into the wildcat's body. Iron Whistle caught a passing wildcat from outside at a very fast speed. Then, it lowered its head and started to eat the wildcat. Do you like to eat these? As a rat monster, Cheese didn't have a good impression of cats. He had eaten wildcat meat before. Of course, it was the kind of stray cat that starved to death on the street. She used to bring such delicious food back occasionally, and the whole family ate happily. Ah, it's late. My mom is about to get up. I have to go back. Cheese looked at the time and quickly climbed out of the cement pipe. Iron Whistle, I'll come to see you tomorrow. Iron Whistle didn't seem to hear him, and just ate the fresh meat bit by bit. Maybe it wasn't enough. The dinner lasted from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Rin Xiling didn't get anyone drunk, but she leaned on the table and made a sound of snoring. Sub-editor Rin didn't know that she was the only ordinary person at the table. She thought she was the best drinker here. Actually, Sister Rin has booked a room for you. When Luochio took care of Rin Xiling expressionlessly, Lizzie whispered something that Boss Luo thought was unreasonable but expected. Louis Iyun might have heard Lizzie's words. The girl's hearing was better than ordinary people. As for her eyesight, it was also better than ordinary people. Feeling Luochio's gaze, Louis Iyun quickly pretended to look at this VIP restaurant. But she soon found there was nothing to look at, so she smiled embarrassedly. She booked a room? The little girl probably knew why that was the case. As expected, she was still a little thin-skinned. Her ears immediately turned red. I remember there's a curfew in the university. You can't go back to the dormitory at this time. Luaccio suddenly asked. Louis Ian gave a start and found a problem. It was indeed a problem. As a student from a small town, she naturally chose the ordinary dormitory. It's all my fault. I forgot the time when I was too happy. Louis Ian asked anxiously. Well, can I go back in time? Probably not. Luaccio shook his head, saying indifferently, Anyway, you've booked a room. You can stay here tonight. Louis Ian opened her mouth, saying subconsciously, But isn't it Sister Wren's? In the end, the little girl was still a little shy and couldn't say that this was for getting a room. But Luaccio, who had been the club boss for some time, had enough demeanor to deal with these things. It's okay. Just take it as an apology for getting drunk, Luaccio said softly. Don't have any psychological burden. It's not a big deal to stay here for one night. Well, okay. The girl couldn't help but follow the mysterious young man's words and was willing to accept his suggestion. The girl felt it was a wonderful trust because after so many years, he was the only one who would approach her grandfather who could no longer remember anything. He was also the only one who could sit quietly by her grandfather's side, accompanying him to watch the sea and accompanying him to paint. He was also the only one who gave her a blue star flower. These were all things that she should remember for a lifetime. When the girl and Luaccio were about to separate in the elevator, Louis suddenly grabbed her skirt, gritting her teeth, and shouted from the closing elevator door, Next time, if you come to the seaside during the winter vacation, I'll treat you well. She looked at the closing elevator door with anxiety, looking at Luaccio inside, looking at his smile, and nod to her, looking at the door finally closing. The little girl turned around and leaned against the wall. Then, she gently covered her chest with her hand. Chapter 466. I want to die. Rin Xiling collapsed on the chair in her office like a zombie. Her eyes were lifeless, as if all the men in the city had visited her. Her face was haggard. Then the door of the sub-editor office was opened. Carrying a bag of Chunghwa bags, Lizzie walked in while chewing. She was surprised. Sister Rin, you can still work? I thought you would take half a day off to sleep. I want to die. Rin Xiling rubbed her stomach. Lizzie, pour me a glass of water. Here you are. Rin Xiling took a sip of water and rubbed her nose. Then she asked, By the way, what happened last night? Were you the one who sent me home? Don't you know? Lizzie was stunned. Didn't Luaccio tell you? How would I know? Rin Xiling said with a bitter face. I woke up early in the morning and I was alone at home. How did I go back? By the way, the room. Did they make it? Lizzie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She sat down and said seriously, Sister Rin, will you be disappointed if I tell you that they didn't make it? So what did I experience? Rin Xiling asked hesitantly. Lizzie laughed, then laughed again, and then smiled mysteriously. Finally, she pretended to be serious. It's better to forget about some things. After all, it's better not to know what you have experienced. Sister Rin, believe me, if you know the truth, you will choose to forget about it. What? Why are you being so mysterious? Rin Xiling frowned. Don't tell me that I'll get drunk and run naked on the street? Ha. Lizzie responded like this. Are you going to tell me or not? Are you itching for a beating? Sub-editor Rin turned on the violent mode. She suddenly jumped up from a chair and intended to pinch Lizzie's face. Stop. Don't run. I promise I won't strangle you. In the morning, the magazine was filled with the aura of the rising sun. However, this kind of chase didn't last long. The magazine's boss stopped them. Do you think this is your own home? What a scandal. The boss probably realized that his restaurant package was gone. His expression turned ugly, and he immediately knew who the culprit was. But even if he had locked onto her, there was nothing he could do. As long as the woman in front of him didn't say anything to his tigress, he would be thankful. Cough, cough, cough. These two are passes from the TV station. The boss gave Rin Xiling and Lizzie 2 passes. For tonight's first performance of I Am a Singer, the two of you go and take some good pictures. It's best if you can find something that can be written. Rin Xiling glanced at the pass and shook her head. I'm not interested in this kind of entertainment business. It's not like you don't know. I still prefer to follow up on the headless body, dismembered case from a few days ago. Rin Xiling, give me back my ticket. Lizzie, pack up. Let's go. Coordinates. TV station. The boss looked at Rin Xiling, leaving in a hurry. He suddenly showed a smile. Little girl, I know your moral integrity is negative. Ma Haod was called to one of the rooms of the forensic department by Old Qin. Old Qin, if you want to tell me the results of the autopsy, why don't you just tell me? But why did you bring me here? Sir Ma looked at Old Qin with some puzzlement. He was working on the computer at the moment. Old Qin was debugging the software in the computer and said, I used the computer to simulate an experiment so that the explanation will be clearer. Look. Old Qin pointed to the computer screen and said, according to the wound on the neck, we simulated the situation of the deceased's head being broken. What is the murder weapon? Ma Haod suddenly became spirited. Old Qin didn't say anything. He just clicked on the start. On the computer's simulated image, the cross-section of the deceased's neck was carefully deduced. These wounds were caused in one go, without any pause in the middle. In addition, according to the shape of the wounds, I made a similar model. This is like a sawtooth animal trap. Ma Haod was stunned. The computer synthesized a huge animal trap. This is the murder weapon? Old Qin said indifferently, if you want to bite a person's neck from top to bottom in one go, you need a biting force that even an animal trap can't provide. But the strange thing is, according to the shape of the wound, it is indeed something as big as an animal trap. Ma Haod was stunned. It's not an animal trap? But what can have such a huge biting force? It can't be the mouth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? Old Qin looked at Ma Haod as if he was mentally retarded. Do you think the appearance of a Tyrannosaurus Rex didn't cause panic? I'm just saying, Ma Haod shrugged, but at least it's a clue before the head of the deceased is found. Then, is there anything else? At this time, Old Qin said seriously, do you still remember the weird mucus found at the murder scene? Ma Haod nodded. Old Qin said, it's not a liquid, but a cell of a creature I've never seen before. Ma Haod didn't understand. Then he pretended to understand. You mean bacteria or something like that? Old Qin said expressionlessly, cells. Teacher Qin, I surrender. I don't understand. Just say it. Ma Haod felt it was better not to continue pretending. At this moment, Old Qin began to extract some strange mucus and put it under the microscope. At the same time, he dripped a drop of red liquid onto the mucus. The red liquid is a kind of bacteria, and the light white part is the mucus. Take a look. Ma Haod narrowed his eyes and stared carefully. After a while, he said in surprise, oh, eaten, the cells of the mucus and bacteria were eaten. It's devouring. Old Qin said seriously. In addition, I used almost all the bacteria I could find, and the result was the same. No matter what it was, the mucus cells could devour it. Damn, the mucus cells are so awesome. Is it actually a kind of virus? Old Qin shook his head. It's not a virus, it's just cells. It's not infectious or harmful. What's more amazing is that this cell even has a strong healing ability. Old Ma, do you know what I think? What? Old Qin narrowed his eyes. Macrophage cells. But obviously, this is not an ordinary macrophage cell that can be cultivated in the outside world. Because every time it devours a kind of bacteria, it will have some characteristics of devouring bacteria. After devouring so many bacteria, its internal structure not only didn't break, but also became stronger. Everything is arranged very neatly. It's like what? Old Qin took a deep breath. In addition to devouring, it can also digest and absorbing all the bacteria for its own use. Then it's evolving. Damn, why do I feel like you're talking about aliens? Ma Haod suddenly felt a bit scared, wasn't it? In this place where there were instruments everywhere, facing a serious guy like Old Qin, who wrote forensic novels and read weird novels. Not aliens. Old Qin shook his head. I just thought of a person. As Old Qin spoke, he pulled out a book from the bookshelf next to him and opened it. I remember this person. 30 years ago, he proposed a hypothesis in the medical field to see if it was possible to develop a type of macrophage that could evolve autonomously to treat cancers that were difficult to treat. I found that this magical cell has a lot of similarities with the macrophage cell in his hypothesis. In other words, this magical cell is more perfect than the macrophage cell in his idea. You suspect that this cell has something to do with this foreign doctor? Mahout frowned. But how many years ago did you say this hypothesis was proposed? 30 years ago. Mahout clicked his tongue and said, then this guy's already 98 years old, right? Old Sheen just shook his head. Obviously, he had been puzzled for more than 1 or 2 days. In fact, he died soon after writing this book. Mahout looked at the author's name at this time, reading it softly. Carl Faust. Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 467. However, Mahout still felt that it was too unrealistic to connect something mentioned in a book 30 years ago with the current case, not to mention that the author had already passed away. So, Sir Ma shook his head, but it happened here, not abroad. Old Sheen, let's put aside this so-called hypothesis and see if you can provide me with any other clues. Some footprints were found at the scene. Old Sheen probably also felt that what he said was illogical, so he didn't insist. After excluding the police and the informant, there's only one group of strangers. According to the depth of the footprints, it should belong to a thin and weak person. It could be a short man or a woman. Could be left by the murderer? Mahout frowned. Old Sheen shook his head. Not necessarily. It's also possible that the informant was not the first to find it. Someone else came here before him, but didn't choose to report it. But what? Generally, if it's a panic, the footprints won't be like this. Old Sheen tilted his head and said strangely, it's so calm, as if the person left slowly. Well, didn't you say that there were other wounds on the victim's body? What happened? They were all wounds of animals. Old Sheen frowned again. Some of them belonged to cats, and some belonged to dogs. It's very messy. Small animals can eat people? Mahout was stunned. He felt that this murder case was getting more and more complicated. In the end, Sir Ma didn't get any important and useful information. He scratched his head and left Old Sheen's office, and went back to his own department with a cigarette in his mouth. Recently, Sir Ma was very free, and he got back his former style. As for why, of course, it was because the young detective from the Provincial Bureau had been away for a long time. He had not been here for a long time, and no one knew what he was doing mysteriously. The only thing that Mahout knew was that he hadn't left this city yet. Ah, so annoying. Mahout finished a cigarette, but still had no clue. He suddenly murmured, let's sweep the mine first? Hongguan was washing his wife's clothes in the ward. Jean Xiao's due date was coming, and it would happen in 2 weeks. The uncle at the garage naturally wouldn't tie Hongguan up and force him to work at this time. Instead, he generously let Hongguan take a vacation and pay him the same salary. Hongguan, someone is looking for you. Hongguan, who was in the bathroom, heard his wife's words. He put down his things and walked out. There was indeed someone here. An old delivery man? An old man with an afro? So avant-garde. He glanced at his wife's expression. She was probably shocked by this old man's avant-garde and kept sneaking glances at him. Sir, are you a delivery man? Hongguan asked in surprise. Can't I deliver a package? The old delivery man glared at him and tugged at the logo on his shirt. Haven't you heard of Watermeter Express? I haven't. Hongguan shook his head and said, but I didn't buy anything. But the old man with an afro seemed to be very impatient. He put down the things and asked Hongguan to sign it. Then he quickly left without saying a word. What's this? Jean Xiao asked curiously. Hongguan shook his head and opened the package. In fact, it was something like a briefcase. It was thin and didn't seem to be able to hold anything. Hongguan took out a small envelope. After opening it, Hongguan suddenly looked at his wife and said in surprise, this is the ticket from the TV station, and it was an admission ticket for the upcoming program Singer. Hongguan frowned. Except for Chung Aran, he really couldn't think of anyone else who would send him such a thing. But why did they send it? There are quite a lot of people. Luochio looked at the endless stream of people. These people were all waiting to enter. Of course, how many of them were arranged in advance to cry in front of the camera, and how many of them were selected by luck? Of course, Boss Luo was not the kind of person who would waste his lifespan to buy such useless information. This was the recording studio of Singer. As for why the club boss and Miss Servant Girl could come here, it was better to say that there was nowhere in the world that they couldn't go. After all, there are 800 public judges. Yi also slightly looked at the scene and then dutifully reminded, Master, Miss Run, and Miss Lizzie are also here. They are over there. Luochio just glanced at them casually. It's just the media. Don't worry about them. Let's go in. The boss, with his maid, calmly walked past the staff on the scene. Before they officially entered, they had already come to the first row in front of the stage and found a seat at the end of the side and sat down. Some people would know that someone was sitting here, but no one would know who was sitting here. Later, no one would remember it, and even the impression would naturally disappear. The boss suddenly reduced his and Yu Ye's sense of existence to almost zero. Speaking of which, I have never seen you use a mobile phone. Luochio took out his mobile phone and turned it to silent mode. Even if his sense of existence almost disappeared, he still subconsciously did some ordinary people's actions, even if these actions seemed so redundant. Luochio would also notice his actions. The explanation he gave himself was that he was probably still holding on to the part of him that was a human being, but it seemed that there was nothing wrong with it. He doesn't need this. Miss Servant Girl smiled. I can hear the master's call immediately, so I don't need this kind of thing. Would she be lonely? Luochio suddenly thought of this in his heart. He would think of the picture of Yi sitting alone in the club. The lights had been dimmed or even extinguished, but she sat there quietly, straight, hands folded on her legs, eyes closed, just to wait for someone to come, and then open her eyes again. And the old clock on the wall was ringing again and again. To her, it was a meaningless time. In the beginning, humans didn't need this kind of thing. Luochio looked at his mobile phone. Talking face to face, eyes to eyes, hand to hand, or sitting at the same table is always closer than ever. But distance requires it. Yi replied, This is the progress of human beings. But distance. Luochio looked at the stage, saying indifferently, It doesn't necessarily disappear with this kind of thing. Speaking of this, Luochio suddenly shook his head, pointing to the center of the stage. It hasn't started yet, but since you're here, let me take a photo for you. The boss turned over his palm, and the old Hasselblad 500C naturally appeared in his hand. Luochio held Yu Ye's hand, walking to the center of the stage, smiling. For now, you belong here, okay? The lights on the stage were suddenly turned on. Oh, strange, who turned on the stage light? Zhong Luochen heard a staff's voice when walking in the corridor. Of course, he didn't care about it. Accompanied by Cheng Yin, he walked into a special viewing area. The seats below the recording studio were for the general public, and there were also first-class seats for the judges. But naturally, there were also VIP seats overlooking the audience. Cheng Yin didn't expect that the second young master would want to attend this kind of occasion. After knowing Zhong Luochen's request, he hurriedly arranged it. As for the reason, if his master didn't tell him, he wouldn't ask. This was the quality of an excellent follower. Of course, the director of the TV station was a subordinate of the second young master's family, so it was easy for him to arrange such a place. Second young master, wait here. I'll get you something to drink and check on Chung Iran's preparation. Then I'll go to the door to wait for Miss Zhang and bring her here. Go ahead. Zhong Luochen nodded. He sat down by himself, but didn't open the curtain in front. He just closed his eyes and rested. Naturally, he wasn't interested in this kind of competition. He just wanted to see what Chung Iran could do, whether tonight would be the same as that day in KNC, where she could make the 800 audience intoxicated. If there really is such a magical magic, Zhong Luochen chuckled and muttered to himself, then it's really worth investing in. Outside the TV station, Hong Guan held the ticket in his hand, hesitating. He didn't know whether to go in or not. He still had Chung Iran's phone number. Chapter 468. Chung Yin thought that the reason why the old master of the Zhong family insisted on the marriage between the Zhong family and the Zhang family was that he might have some special feelings for Mrs. Zhang. From some details, it wasn't hard for him to see that the old master had this kind of feeling, The feelings of the people in that era were naturally different from the feelings of the modern young people. But this thought gradually decreased. For example, this Ms. Zhang was indeed an excellent successor of the Zhong family. The assets behind the Zhong family were hard to calculate, and the account books on the surface couldn't be taken seriously, but it was still incomparable to the rich people in the country. It was the first time for him to see the only successor of such huge hidden assets wearing clothes that cost more than 10 yuan and driving a Volkswagen that cost more than 100,000 yuan. The old master had endured hardships and experienced the Great Famine. Later on, he joined the army and was very frugal all his life. Perhaps the old master really liked such a junior. Miss Zhang, you're here. After Zhang Qingrui parked the car on the avenue outside the TV station, Cheng Yun hurriedly walked up. Second young master is waiting for you inside. Then let's go. Zhang Qingrui nodded. Can I go in from the side door? Don't worry, I've prepared everything. Cheng Yun nodded and said, please follow me. He knew that Zhang Qingrui didn't like to appear in front of people, especially when many famous singers gathered in the TV station tonight. The entrance was already full of cameras and fans of these singers. I may leave earlier. Zhang Qingrui lowered her head and said softly, I'll go to the hospital to accompany my grandma later. I'll check the newcomer that the company wants to promote this time. This was the entertainment company under the new collective of the Zhong family and the Zhang family. Zhang Qingrui's shares in Fei Entertainment were almost the same as Zhong Luoqin's, and the rest were the shares of the new group. After all, it was a company that she had invested in. So even though she didn't have much interest in it, she couldn't just ignore it. It was unreasonable for her to ignore it. Zhang Lilinfeng didn't announce her engagement with the Zhong family at her birthday party last time, which was already a concession. She didn't mention it again after that. The two families have been keeping a vague and ambiguous attitude on this issue. Therefore, Zhang Qingrui knew that she couldn't ignore the new company. It was her way of repaying her grandma. Her grandmother, on the other hand, had been in low spirits ever since the birthday banquet. She would be absent-minded for no reason. She used to be in charge of the Zhang family's business in an orderly manner, but recently, she had paid less attention to it. But what made Zhang Qingrui feel strange was that Zhang Lilinfeng's current appearance was a little different. An ordinary grandmother with a lot on her mind. Thinking of this, Zhang Qingrui followed Cheng Yun into the TV station through a special passage. Wait, this doesn't seem to be the way to the studio. Zhang Qingrui suddenly stopped. Cheng Yun immediately put on a smiling face and said, Miss Zhang, of course we have VIP seats. Young master knows that you don't like to show off, so he asked for a quiet room. Don't worry, no one will disturb us. Okay, Zhang Qingrui nodded. She didn't have a good impression of Zhong Luochen, nor did she hate him. She just didn't want to get close to him. At least, she wouldn't talk too deeply with him. She always felt that there was nothing in this almost perfect man, just a piece of nothingness. He had drawn an almost perfect skin, but was there any bone inside? Wait a minute. Zhang Qingrui stopped again. Then, under Cheng Yun's surprised gaze, she walked towards the corner of the corridor, where two people were standing at this moment. Two women. Cheng Yun had a good memory. If not, how could he fight his way through thousands of people and follow Zhong Luoqin's footsteps? He immediately recognized one of the two women. He had seen her before, and he had done some research on her. Several months ago, Zhong Luoqin came to this city and met her in Guyuzhai, which was run by Zhang Qingrui. He remembered that this woman was called Ren Xiling, the deputy chief editor of a good magazine. Hello, Miss Run. At this moment, Ren Xiling, who was squatting on the ground and fiddling with the backpack with Li Zi, was stunned and subconsciously looked up. Miss Zhang, it's you, long time no see. Ren Xiling not only interviewed this young woman in charge of the antique shop, but also knew that she was the only classmate of her baby. Therefore, Ren Xiling became enthusiastic. Why are you here? Zhang Qingrui smiled. I'm just here to have a look. Oh, Ren Xiling nodded. Well, I've seen the information of Fei Entertainment. I remember your name is on the top management. Are you here to see the super newcomer of your company? Zhang Qingrui nodded. Miss Ren's sense of touch is so sharp. Of course, I rely on this to make a living. Hmm. I see that you guys are also here for the show later, right? Yes. Run Xiling sighed. It's a task from the boss. I can't help it. I don't mean anything. I'm just not interested in it. Zhang Qingrui shook her head. Well, what's the problem? I just saw you and your colleague discussing something. Rin Xiling rolled her eyes and said, It's nothing. It's just that the arrangement here is a little different from the original plan. I just had a quarrel with the program crew. Zhang Qingrui nodded. Suddenly, she turned her head and looked at Cheng Yun, who had walked over and stood behind her cautiously. Cheng Yun, can you help Miss Ren with anything? Okay. Cheng Yun hurriedly nodded and said, I'll communicate with the program group. I'll definitely arrange the best seat for Miss Run. Wow, how can you accept it? Sister Run, you obviously want to accept it. Lizzie, who had seen through everything, took out a bag of steamed buns and ate them. It's okay. I'm happy to help others. Zhang Qingrui smiled. I was taken care of by Luoqiu before. Seeing Cheng Yun leaving hurriedly, she guessed that Cheng Yun was going to contact the staff. She suddenly asked, By the way, is Luoqiu? How is he recently? Pretty good. He can eat, sleep, and make fun of me. Rin Xiling said subconsciously, but then she felt something was wrong, asking curiously, Hey, aren't you classmates? You see each other every day. Why are you asking me? Zhang Qingrui was stunned. We didn't see each other often. I heard he quit school, and we haven't seen each other since the summer vacation. Quit school? Miss Run, you seem to be. Zhang Qingrui frowned. Don't you know? Ha, how can I not know? Rin Xiling laughed. Of course I know. Ha. He's fine. Thanks for your concern. Of course I know. Shit. Luoqiu, you're dead. Why is the boss here? Why is the most evil maid in the club here? Most importantly, I've been here for a long time. Only the boss knows the whereabouts of the Black Soul envoys, but the Black Soul envoys don't know the boss's whereabouts. So, did the boss know what I did behind the scenes, so he came to check on me? This made Tianzi, who was preparing to make a big news, very sad. After watching the spotlights in the studio, he happily rolled over to greet the boss. Master, why are you here? The boss, who had just finished a set of photos for Yu Yi, seemed to be in a good mood, joking, If I'm here to check on you, will you be happy? Yes. Tianzi's body stiffened. I am. Who is? I'm so grateful. I'm so excited. It's like a fairy entering my body, 3 flowers gathering above my head, ascending to immortality. F*CK. I don't know what you're talking about. Then sit down. Luoqiu just waved his hand. In addition to Chung Aran, there's also a singer I used to like. Since you're here, you can accompany me. Yes, sir. Tianzi dared not to be too presumptuous in front of the boss, so he only dared to sit on less than 1/3 of the chair. Should be fine. Tianzi was slightly relieved. Well, let Hongwan come here. Unexpectedly, the boss said lightly, It's an interesting idea. Chapter 469. Tianzi sat down. He wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Luoqiu looked at him, thinking about what kind of role this old Taoist was in his sect 500 years ago, but he didn't say anything. Master, do you want something to drink? Tianzi, he said suddenly, but he regretted it as soon as he spoke. He clearly felt the gaze from Miss Servant Girl. It was sharp and playful, deep blue, taking care of the master's food and living. I really don't want to steal your job. Don't look at me like that. Tianzi suddenly shivered. I'm not thirsty. Luoqiu looked at Tianzi's restless appearance. He knew what was going on. He chuckled, as if encouraging him. Tianzi, do you still remember the Jianghu that belonged to you 500 years ago? Tianzi was stunned. After being stunned for a while, he obviously fell into deep thought. 500 years ago, the Jianghu that belonged to him? What was it like? Tianzi seemed to see thousands of mountains and rivers in a trance. That was the Jianghu from a very long time ago. The 3 members of the club then quieted down. Miss Servant Girl was used to waiting, and the boss would enjoy the process of waiting. And Tianzi of Onyx, Soul, might also be waiting for something. The makeup artist was busy dressing up Chung Iran in a separate room provided for the singers backstage. According to the rules of the program, the order of the singers was decided by the audience's votes. The more votes the singer had, the more anticipated he would be the last singer to appear on the stage. Chung Aran was the first one to appear. But Li Zifeng said it was okay, because he believed that Chung Aran could conquer everyone's ears at the beginning. You've already come this far. Don't think about anything now. Li Zifeng pressed Chung Aran's shoulder, looking at him in the mirror. Wait a moment. Burst out all your energy. From tonight on, let everyone remember your name. Li Zifeng was indeed a person who was good at stirring up emotions, even if he had all kinds of unorthodox means. But no doubt, his means were effective, weren't they? There was no doubt that this new singer already trusted him quite a bit. Li Zifeng believed that this relationship would become stronger in the days to come. I'll tell you a secret. Mr. Zhong is also here. At this time, Li Zifeng said seriously, you feel it, right? The company's attention to you. Don't you feel like I'm adding to your stress by telling you all this? But you should know that if you can't even bear this pressure. Chung Aran suddenly waved his hand. I want to be alone before I go on the stage. Well, I'll call you when it's time. Li Zifeng nodded. I'll wait for you outside, sitting in the lounge, to rest, to sit, to rest, to rest. He put the guitar on his legs and gently strummed it while looking at himself in the mirror. I've finally come to this point. You see it? I've finally come to this point, with you and my dream, our dream. The I here was himself, but the you here wasn't Hongguan. Chung Aran once thought that the here could refer to himself and Hongguan, but now he was the only one left. But it doesn't matter. Chung Aran said to himself, just because the you here was still you. Chung Aran started to play rhythmically instead of casually plucking the strings. He was playing an unfinished original composition that he couldn't finish, and it wasn't his original composition. Can you hear it? Today he intended to finish it. You see it too? Aran, he's going to go on the stage, the first one. In the auditorium, Hongguan sat silently. The seat given by the admission ticket was unexpectedly close to the front of the stage. He finally walked in. Looking at the stage, Hongguan couldn't help but recall the scene when he walked on the stage for the first time. Of course, the stage at that time couldn't be compared with this one. It was just a small place in the alley of the old capital, a small pub. That year, several young people who were still pursuing their music dreams formed a band. They were not afraid of heaven or earth. They didn't even have their own posters. Their first performance was on the blackboard at the entrance of the pub, where the name of the band and the price of the ticket were simply written. Hongguan clearly remembered that only 5 tickets were sold for the first performance, 50 yuan each. It was even less than their meal for a day. However, this first performance could be remembered by him for a lifetime. Shouldn't we remember those who performed with dreams? Our beginning? Time flew. Hongguan couldn't hear clearly what the host on the stage said, but he suddenly heard a lot of applause. He knew that Chung Aran was going to go on the stage. This kind of warm applause was probably due to the host's contribution. But Hongguan thought that Feiyan Entertainment probably also had a share. 7 or 8 young people sat in the front of the stage, holding a fluorescent sign with Chung Aran's name in their hands. Have they already developed a fan club? That's really fast. But obviously, they haven't really released an official single. Let's welcome our first singer, Chung Aran. The host generously pointed to the passage where the singer walked out. In the end, can this newcomer explode with great energy and conquer all of us? Let's welcome her. In the center of the stage, a figure appeared in the passage. When the magnesium light shone, Hongguan saw this familiar yet strange face. But he thought that Chung Aran couldn't see him because he was sitting in a dark place. The stage was between the brilliance and the dimness, and the stage was also between 2 different worlds. Chung Aran didn't wave to any audience here. She simply carried the guitar and walked out like this. The scene was quiet, but Chung Aran seemed to be quieter than everyone here. He just silently plugged the electric guitar into the sound effect and hung it up. Closing her eyes, she stood alone in front of the towering microphone. The audience was still silent, unusually silent, because looking at Chung Aran's appearance, she seemed to be planning to solo here. Where were the musicians? There was no bass, no drummer, and no electric guitar player. And the music director was also stunned. A singer like this who reported her performance naturally didn't need to use the music on the spot. But this newcomer just came up alone. What's the matter? Li Zifeng watched from below the stage and couldn't help but frown. He quickly made a phone call. Why is Chung Yiran the only one on stage? Where are the other musicians? Producer Li, when it was time to go on stage, Mr. Chung asked us to leave and said that we were not needed. What? Li Zifeng almost had an impulse to throw the phone away. He subconsciously said angrily, what does he want to do? He only has a guitar. What is he going to do? We don't know. We are also angry. Is he kidding us? Wait a moment. Li Zifeng took a deep breath. What he needed to do most was to deal with the crisis. But the problem was Chung Yiran was already on the stage. If he suddenly stopped, his face would be too ugly. Is this Chung Yiran? On the special seat above the studio, Zhang Qingrui looked at the center of the stage through the open curtain, looking at this man who should have already left the impulsive age of youth. Chung Yiran didn't leave a deep impression on Zhang Qingrui based on his appearance, but the way he came up alone made her feel quite strange. Didn't you say that he is a rock singer? Zhang Qingrui asked curiously. Is the first song a solo? Chengyan? Zhong Luochun just asked indifferently. Chengyan hurriedly said, Second young master, this is not what we planned. According to the plan, he should sing a single here. We have invited the best songwriters to tailor the songs for Chung Yiran. Well, there might be some misunderstandings in the process. Do you want me to communicate with the program group now? No need. Zhong Luochun shook his head, saying indifferently, Let's see what he is going to do. Zhang Qingrui glanced at Zhong Luochun indifferently, then raised the binoculars in her hand, and then swept to the front of the stage again. The round lenses infinitely narrowed the distance between her sight and the stage. But at the moment of moving, Zhang Qingrui suddenly stopped. What did she see? In the first row, she saw her amazing classmate. Zhang Qingrui suddenly put down the binoculars in her hand, frowning. She did it very lightly. At least she was sure that it didn't attract the attention of Zhong Luochun and Changyan. Zhang Qingrui's heart moved at this moment. When she raised the binoculars again, her eyes converged on that position again, but she didn't see anything. Was she dazzled? At this moment, a voice sounded. Chung Yiran's voice. There's a girl. She likes rock more than anyone else. There is a girl. She left an unfinished song for me. This night, I plan to finish it. The plectrum lightly swept over the guitar. The crisp tone was like a pair of magical hands, gently grasping the hearts of the audience. Chung Yiran slowly opened his eyes. I wrote the lyrics myself. Maybe it's not good, but I give it to you again. This is Xiaoming's song. Chapter 470. Her name was Xiaoming, the only girl in the band. Zhou Sigang claimed to be a girl from the northeast, a petite girl. Hongguan felt that she was very rebellious, but Chung Yiran liked her uniqueness. It could be said that from the beginning, he was attracted by the wildness of this petite girl. But in fact, regardless of whether she was rebellious or unique, everyone should be grateful to be able to meet each other in the vast sea of people. This girl came to the capital even earlier than Hongguan and Chung Yiran. Their meeting began on the streets. That year it snowed. Chung Yiran and Hongguan were performing on the street behind a university. The two of them shouted, but they didn't earn much applause, let alone much money, because the passers-by had too many choices and they were surrounded by people like them. Because there were too many people like them in this place. There were really a lot. Before it snowed, in the rented small rental house, Hongguan was gnawing on bread, and Chung Yiran was eating braised beef instant noodles that almost numbed his taste buds. The two of them were still warming themselves by the charcoal fire. Hongguan suddenly said that they had no money and only had 83 yuan left. Chung Yiran said, Let's go to the street and have a look. It was that kind of day, on a snowy day, that they met this petite girl. Her hair was dyed purple, and it was almost as short as a board cut. Chung Yiran remembered the thin earring on the girl's left ear, and there was nothing on the other side. He felt that she might have been born as a weirdo, and the facts seemed to prove this point. I like your music. That was the first sentence that Xiaoming said to them. Do you want to join my band? I will provide food and accommodation, and you will take care of yourself. And this was the second sentence that Xiao Meng said to the two of them. Including herself, there were only 3 people in Xiao Meng's band. Including Chung Iran and Hong Guan, it suddenly became 5 people. Chung Iran later found out that the other 2 members of the band were also picked up by a Xiao Meng on the street. This girl had more vitality than men. Later, Chung Iran found out that Xiao Meng was not a girl born and raised in the Northeast. She was born in Beijing, and her father was an authentic Northeastern man. Like Chung Iran and Hong Guan, he was one of the first generation of rock musicians who came to Beijing to make a living when he was young. Xiao Meng was very proud when she talked about her father, but she smiled and said that it was a pity that he died early and left her a scourge. She asked everyone, including Chung Iran, weren't they afraid of being harmed by her if they followed her without thinking? The masters of the band pondered for a long time, and then they all said with a smile, why don't we line up and harm her one by one? Otherwise, I'm afraid that she won't be able to handle it all at once. Xiao Meng picked up the guitar and hit them one by one. Later, she scratched the guitar, and there was a small scratch, which made her feel distressed for a long time. It was Chung Iran who came up with an idea later. She carved the word Tian on this scratch, and then carved Hai Kwang, Kong, and found the instruments of the other members. Well, because it was unnecessary, Xiao Meng smiled through tears. Every day, they had an unprecedented drive and vision, talking about all the possibilities from day to afternoon to night. When they turned around, it was already late at night, just to argue about the adaptation of a song. One day, Hong Guan took out a box. Xiao Meng asked curiously, what is this? Hong Guan said with a smile, I bought it from an old man at a roadside stall. There are exactly 5 of them. It looked like a brand made of copper or iron, tied with a black rope, and simply turned into a necklace. Chung Iran didn't like it. She said that it was like a dog tag. The other 2 wondered whether it was better to wear it on their hands or hands, because it did look like a dog tag. Only Xiao Meng drove everyone out of the yard and sat down in a row. They were like customers sitting in front of old Hu Tong's barber shop. Xiao Meng put on the things that were later named dog tag on them one by one. Xiao Meng finally put on herself. She turned around in front of them, like a fairy who specialized in doing bad things in fairy tales. She put her hands on her waist and said, let's think of the name of the band in the future. It's called Dog Tag. F*CK. F*CKU. Get out of here. Ha 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 ha. Xiao Meng covered her stomach and squatted on the ground. After a long time, she wiped her eyes that were about to squeeze out tears from laughing and stood up again. They had never seen Xiao Meng at this moment. It was like a fairy who had done bad things suddenly turned into a beautiful elf. In the afternoon in the yard, she whispered, then let's call it again. Again. So they officially had the name of their own band. After the beginning of spring, the name was written on a small blackboard in front of a bar in the old alley of Beijing. Again, 50 yuan. Why are there so many exclamation marks? Xiao Meng then added a few more exclamation marks at the back. Then, she counted the number of exclamation marks with satisfaction as she said with a matter-of-fact smile, just to cheat the word count, to take up space. In the end, only 5 tickets were sold, but everyone almost shouted themselves hoarse. Xiao Meng was gone. Suddenly, she was gone. Very suddenly, she was gone. Very suddenly, everyone felt like it was a dream. Because of a car accident, the driver was not found at the scene, but the car was still there. However, 1 week after the car accident, an old man turned himself in. As for the car owner, the young car owner drove a new sports car again. 1 month later, Chung Iran, Hong Guan, and another band member were arrested for endangering other people's lives. Again was established for nearly a year. The exact time was 11 months and 7 days, and then it was disbanded. Again, Chung Iran seemed to be telling a story that made everyone sad. What were the lyrics? No one cared. Or it could be said that because they were almost immersed in the rhythm, they forgot everything in the outside world. How could he do this? To be able to make almost all the people on the scene cry. Even those famous singers in the waiting room who were waiting for the next performance also stared at the live broadcast screen in a daze. There were no extra shots. It was as if the cameraman had disappeared. The lenses of several different cameras were all locked onto the man who was playing and singing on the stage. They never moved for a moment, nor did they insert any frame of footage of the live audience. "It's too abnormal." Lizzie frowned, looking at Run Xiling beside her. She found that she was crying silently without knowing it, as if she was bewitched. Almost all the audience, including the professional commentators, were bewitched. As a monster, she had an innate intuition. Her intuition told her that there was something strange about the man on the stage. She could also feel that something was stirring her heart. But even so, she was far from being addicted like ordinary people. So Lizzie tore open a bag of beef jerky silently. As an onlooker, this kind of stirring was harmless to people. At least, she didn't feel any harm for the time being. He really did it. Zhong Luochen looked at everyone's reaction, at the fixed live broadcast screen, at Cheng Yun and Zhang Qingrui, looking at everyone's absent-mindedness. So far, he was sure that the man on the stage had an incredible magic, an abnormal magic. But he didn't panic or fear because this kind of magic had no effect on him, who had almost no emotions and 6 desires. A bold idea began to slowly emerge in Zhong Luochen's mind. Probably. Could he find a large number of these people with strange abilities? Could he gather them together? That place had always existed and had always been trading. There was a dark side of the world that ordinary people couldn't understand. Maybe it was feasible. For example, he met Chung Iran, an excellent person, overnight. Then, of those outstanding people in the world, how many of them were actually not born that way? If I can change an era, Zhong Luochen's eyes flashed with unknown brilliance, muttering to himself, would it be a great achievement? Yangming realized that his heart was already beating wildly when he thought about it. An illusory and unreal sense of satisfaction made him feel the excitement that had not appeared in his spiritual world for a long time. Like the climax. Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 471. Li Zifeng once again experienced what happened that night when he met Chung Iran. This was a live broadcast on TV. This was a program with a large number of audience members. But at this moment, everyone in the audience was shouting again. Of course, they were not shouting the name of the song Chung Iran was singing, but the original meaning of the word. Again, everyone was shouting for the newcomer to come on the stage for the first time. Don't leave the stage. This kind of impulsive behavior actually happened in this kind of live TV program. Even the director of the program didn't seem to want to deal with it. The director, who was quite famous because of this program, also sat there blankly, as if he was thinking about something. Li Zifeng could understand the feeling of the director, because he was the one who listened to Chung Iran the most. He couldn't deny that he had been sincerely conquered by this man's live performance. Because even his ears were conquered, he had great confidence that this man could emit great light and heat in the future. It was worth it for him to use all kinds of means to completely tie Chung Iran to himself. Don't leave the stage. Chung Iran, Chung Iran, Chung Iran. But once Chung Iran finished singing, he bowed deeply to all the audience on the stage and walked down from the side of the stage to Li Zifeng. God, you almost scare me to death. Li Zifeng sighed. Seeing you come out alone and change the song at the last minute, I was really scared. But I didn't expect that you're still so good. It's perfect. But next time, can you tell me in advance? I'm timid. Li Zifeng couldn't even suppress his impulse and hugged Chung Iran tightly. Do you know? Reason tells me that I should take you back to the lounge and wait for the final result. But there's also a voice telling me that I should kick you back to the stage and let you continue to sing. Let's go. Chung Iran just nodded indifferently, carrying the guitar on his back, and left towards the side safety door. But the audience's mood obviously became a little excited because of Chung Iran's departure. Of course, they didn't lose their minds too much. But now, they didn't know when the expectation of the next singer had dropped to the lowest, or is already gone. Hongguan sighed softly. He witnessed this magical scene with his own eyes, and heard the people around her were talking about Chung Aran. Hongguan felt that it was a bit incredible. When the sound of the guitar rang out on the stage, his memories were like a flood that had opened the floodgates. They rushed recklessly in his mind, as if bringing him directly back to many years ago. The days and nights of 11 months and 7 days were constantly rotating in his mind. However, even though he listened attentively, he wasn't as immersed in the music as the live audience. Iran's singing has really improved a lot. Hongguan slowly recalled Chung Iran's performance on the stage a few minutes ago and suddenly showed a smile. Moreover, his guitar skills are still as good as before. Hongguan took a deep breath. Unlike the other audience, who were still reluctant to part with Chung Iran, he quietly left his seat. No one noticed his departure because the audience's mind was still on Chung Iran, the newcomer. Hongguan directly left the TV station without any pause. The next performance might be wonderful, but his mind was not here. He would rather go back to the hospital to accompany his wife. He was also abiding by the agreement he signed. Hongguan suddenly felt that the reason why this ticket was sent to him was probably that Chung Iran wanted to tell him something. He didn't forget the original agreement, but you have given up. Now the stage is between us. Between us. Xiaoming, Iran has done it for you. Hongguan looked back at the TV station and then looked at the night sky and suddenly smiled again. Are you also listening on the stage? He suddenly didn't hate Chung Iran for asking Li Zifeng to negotiate with him. At this moment, he looked up at the sky and took a deep breath because it's not you who left us, but I also left you in the end. Only Iran is still here. Hongguan sighed, tidying up his complicated mood. He found his electric car on the roadside and went all the way to the hospital. He sincerely thanked fate for letting Chung Iran walk on this stage and sing this song. Damn, he left just like that? If it weren't for the supreme boss of the club and Miss Maid beside him, Tainzi felt that he would be fuming with anger at this moment. It was reasonable. The master liked high-quality souls, so Tainzi naturally wanted to study in this direction. The two brothers had a good relationship, but they almost turned against each other because of Li Zifeng's interference. This must make Chung Iran's soul imperfect. Tainzi was looking forward to the real meeting between Hongguan and Chung Iran, and then this rookie of the club would turn the situation around, expose Li Zifeng's trick, and make them reconcile. Of course, because he didn't know that his master would come in person, this old Taoist could only accompany the boss all the time, and the plan naturally failed. Tainzi, good delivery. Standing outside the TV station, the boss suddenly sent a sentence lightly. Tainzi, who had been pondering, heard it and instinctively trembled, saying in horror, Master, I deserve to die. I'm so stupid. This time, Master, what did you say just now? I said, although you always do things simply and rudely. Luochio smiled, patting Tainzi's shoulder gently, but this time, the delivery was really good. But Hongguan, Tainzi was stunned and couldn't think of what to say. Was the boss's words praising him or something else? Master, why do I feel a little nervous when you say so? This rookie of the club, Black Soul Messenger, was even more willing to be hung up by Miss Maid at this time, feeling more at ease. Let's go. Luochio didn't look at Tainzi, but at Yu Yi, saying softly, after being influenced by Chung Iran, the following singers probably can't perform well, so there's nothing to look forward to. Master, do you need to prepare supper? No need. Luochio shook his head and suddenly said with interest, the bus route here is good. We could take a detour to the old town. Sit with me. I want to see the night scene. Okay, so, did he do the right thing? Or did he do something wrong? Tainzi watched the two big shots walking away, feeling disordered in the wind. I was King praised? Tainzi was dumbfounded. Am I not a salted fish? The audience's emotions calmed down later. After all, the host was a professional. Although he couldn't suppress his emotions, he still forced himself to calm down, walking on the stage and continuing to host this program. After all, the program just started, and it was only the first song, and there were many veteran singers who hadn't appeared yet. But there's really someone who could move people to this extent with music. This was also the first time the host had seen such a thing in his life. This person's future was immeasurable. Then, the next singer came on the stage. Of course, he was under unprecedented pressure. But who knew what he had experienced on the way from the waiting room to the stage? Anyway, the second singer to go on stage sang the first key incorrectly. How do you feel? On the stage, Zhong Luochen suddenly asked, because he noticed Zhang Qingrui had calmed down. Zhang Qingrui looked down the stage, and the next singer came on the stage. After thinking for a while, she said, "This Chang Yaran, his song, seems to have a god living in it. It's so wonderful." Zhong Luochen suddenly narrowed his eyes. Yes, it's really wonderful. This person deserves the full support of the company. Zhang Qingrui nodded. Let Cheng Yun handle this matter well. In the future, Cheng Yaran may become the top star of Feiyun Entertainment. Second master, Ms. Zhang, I'll definitely handle this matter well. You two can rest assured. Cheng Yun patted his chest and promised. At this moment, Zhong Luochen looked at Zhang Qingrui, suddenly saying, "What? After listening to Cheng Yaran, are you still in the mood to watch the next singer?" Zhang Qingrui gave a start, frowning slightly. Zhong Luochen didn't overdo it. "I see you've been looking down the stage, quite concerned." Zhang Qingrui said indifferently, "I'm just looking at the audience's reaction. Isn't the difference the best proof that the company wants to cultivate Cheng Yaran?" "That's right." Zhong Luochen chuckled, not intending to ask more. Zhang Qingrui didn't continue to look down, but searched for the figure that might not have appeared and was just a figment of her imagination. She stood up, saying, "I'll go first." Zhong Luochen waved his hand. "Cheng Yun, see Miss Zhang off. And say hello to old madam for me." Zhang Qingrui glanced at Zhong Luochen indifferently. This man, she still couldn't see his bones. Although it was later than usual, as expected, Luochio could see Ren Xiling open the door like a defeated dog, stepping on her shoes and lying on the sofa. "Have you eaten?" Ren Xiling said weakly. "Well, I just came back. I ate something on the street with Lizzie. Drink some water." Luochio brought a cup of warm water. Ren Xiling got up and took the cup, but suddenly patted the sofa beside her, indicating Boss Luo to sit down. Chapter 472. Luochio was not surprised that Ren Xiling knew about his withdrawal. He didn't intend to hide it, but he didn't expect that after a long time, Ren Xiling still didn't realize it. But he had already prepared an excuse, which was something he really planned to do in the future. "Because I need to transfer to another school, so I need to withdraw." "Transfer to another school?" Ren Xiling was stunned and frowned. She knew it from Zhang Qingrui, and it happened a long time ago, so she was very angry at that time. But when she came home and took a glass of warm water from the child as usual, she forgot all her anger. "Tell me, what happened? If you don't tell me, you won't sleep tonight. Wasn't such a punishment a bit too light?" "It's nothing," Luochio said indifferently. "I just took the exam of another school and passed it, so I plan to transfer to another school." "I see." Ren Xiling nodded. "If that was all, it will be fine." At that time, Luochio's grades in the college entrance examination were obviously very good, but he chose a very unpopular major with only 2 students. At that time, Ren Xiling knew that he hadn't completely untied the knot in his heart. She didn't say anything and just let it be. Now Luochio began to choose a new school. In a sense, it was even a good thing. "Lao Luo, did you see that? Your son has walked out. Not only has he started to choose his own life again, but he has also deceived a very obedient little girl. You should have told me earlier." Ren Xiling opened her eyes wide. Her eyes were misty, and her voice was trembling. Luochio frowned. "What's the problem?" No, not at all." Ren Xiling rubbed her eyes. "Did you open the window too much? Why do I feel like sand is blown into my eyes?" "Hey, what school is that?" "St. Andrew's University." Ren Xiling blinked and said subconsciously, "What the hell? Where is it?" "Scotland." "Oh, Scotland." Ren Xiling nodded, and then said in surprise, "Wait a minute. When you say transfer school, you mean directly transfer to England? Is there a problem?" Luochio said indifferently, "I've already been accepted. After the new year, in April, I'll go over." Rin Xiling suddenly fell silent. Luochio accompanied her in silence. Not long after, Ren Xiling suddenly took a deep breath, then quickly walked back to her room. After a few minutes, Ren Xiling came out with a document bag. She poured the contents onto the coffee table, then squatted in front of the coffee table and began to fiddle with the things that were poured out. Bank passbooks, some documents, contracts, and the like. "What are you doing?" Luochio asked, puzzled. Ren Xiling didn't even raise her head. "Hey, don't disturb me. Let me calculate how much savings we have. Don't you need money to study in England? Studying abroad is very expensive, okay? Let me think. The car has been provided, and it's almost finished. Well, anyway, I don't drive fast now. How about changing one? It would be better to sell the current one. As for the house, what month did you say next year? You see, if you leave, I can't live in such a big place alone. Just change to a small one with 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. Living alone, we can't lose the rent, right? By the way, how much is the tuition fee there?" She finally raised her head and looked at Luochio and asked. Luochio suddenly asked, "You don't suspect that I'm lying to you?" Ren Xiling was stunned. "Why would you lie to me? Are you sick?" Luochio just shook his head slightly. "Don't worry. The school there promised to pay my full tuition fee. So, you don't have to sell your car, and you don't have to change your place. If you change here, I won't be able to find the place when I come back during the holidays. Get out of here." Ren Xiling suddenly scolded. "Do you know how tired I am today? Do you know how hard I endured when I heard that you were going to England? I'm counting money to distract myself. You stinking brat. You said you won't be able to find the place when you come back. Are you deliberately making me feel uncomfortable? Why didn't you tell me about such a big thing like transferring schools? If I didn't ask you, were you going to leave a note before you left?" "I thought about it." Luochio nodded seriously. "You really thought about it?" Ren Xiling, sub-editor Ren, felt uncomfortable for a moment, but she suddenly laughed. Luochio was still the Luochio she knew. He didn't change at all. She was familiar with him, as if he was her own son. Luochio found that although this woman was often sloppy, she was actually very beautiful. Especially when she smiled, it was very heartwarming. That night, they didn't continue to discuss this issue. As usual, they returned to their own rooms after it was time. In fact, Luochio didn't need to sleep to replenish his energy, but he still did what ordinary people did. Probably he instinctively felt that it was actually very easy to fall asleep in this room, in this house. He had slowly realized that if he stayed in this city, the fact that he was the boss of the club would be exposed to this woman one day. And leaving was just to protect her better. After waiting for the next year, his ability would probably grow to another level. Because after the recent transactions, Luochio had vaguely felt that his ability would soon usher in a qualitative change. At that time, even if they were separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, there would be no problem. Finally, even this feeling began to fade. Before closing his eyes, Luochio was thinking about something. He knew that it was probably because he had always had this kind of unmotivated attitude ever since he took over the club. That was why his apathy had developed so quickly. This was probably the black hand under the altar. Of course, it only accelerated the stripping of his human emotions, but in other aspects, there was no restriction at all. But the previous boss, even after countless years, still retained some sentiments for some things and some people. Was it because he had been boring and repeating a lot of transactions? If it continued, he would become a puppet. Luochio continued to ponder. He didn't know whether his thoughts would be reflected in the altar, the real source of the club's power. But at this moment, he was very sure that he was thinking about a problem from a rational point of view. Should he make some countermeasures? Should I peep into the future? The boss slowly closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Ren Xiling didn't sleep. She just turned on a small table lamp and began to count the days. Day by day, she found that there was still half a year left. Half a year. Ren Xiling bit her fingernails and muttered, "Or, let this brat get married first? Anyway, the university doesn't forbid this. Oh my God, I forgot to ask you his phone number last time when we had dinner. I'm a pig." In short, Ren Xiling just couldn't sleep. "I want to die." Still in the elevator, Ren Xiling was like a zombie. She didn't sleep all night, thinking about the plan of becoming a mother-in-law in half a year. She even walked like a mummy. Lizzie, who was eating potato chips early in the morning, ran to Run Xiling energetically. "Sister Run, do you have the video recorded last night? I couldn't find it when I woke up this morning." "Look for it." Run Xiling put her bag on Lizzie's small chest and then leaned on her desk. She said weakly, "I haven't seen you so active before. Because the boss said that we have to hand in the manuscript to him at noon. Our magazine is sold on Tuesday, and we have to print it tonight." Lizzie said that she knew it because she came to work early, and the boss asked you to write about Chung Iran. You have to be objective and not be so sarcastic. Did Feiyun Entertainment bribe the boss? Run Xiling began to be sarcastic. "I don't know about this." Lizzie shrugged, "But I heard from Xiao Wang that there is a rumor in the big entertainment dog-leading group that there is a mysterious force that wants to promote Chung Iran. Probably after today, the headlines and online versions will be flooded." Run Xiling patted her face to make herself more energetic. "Okay, work. I want to earn royalties. Earn more. But speaking of which, Chung Iran really moved me last night. By the way, did the internet explode? After all, the final result last night was that Chung Iran, a newcomer, defeated all the veteran singers and won the first place in the first round. Almost all the votes," Lizzie said with a strange expression. "It did explode, but the direction of the explosion seems to be a little different. Sister Ren, you'd better see it yourself." Lizzie turned on her laptop and then entered a discussion page about this music program in the online community. "If there is no PY transaction behind the scenes, I will live broadcast eating shit. Is it because of the mysterious force behind the scenes? To talk about how an extremely ordinary newbie could cheat. By the way, it's my birthday tomorrow. To be honest, I'm the only one who thinks that Chung Iran's singing is really ordinary. But the song is okay. But it's just okay. The one who said the divine song is probably not a water army. Except for Chung Iran last night, were the others collectively affected by the great mental retardation spell? They all performed abnormally, believe it?" Run Xiling read the comments one by one. There were 5 or 6 pages of comments about the final result of last night. What the F***CK? Did Chung Iran do something to make people hate him? These several pages are all over the forum. Lizzie said indifferently, "These 5 or 6 pages are the result of the struggle of the authority. You didn't see the grand occasion when the whole discussion page was crazy last night." Run Xiling frowned and said, "No, I was also there last night. I felt so good that I squeezed out a few drops of tears." "Lizzie, you were there last night too." "I was eating. I didn't notice." Seeing Run Xiling squinting her eyes, Lizzie immediately changed her words. "But Sister Ren, although there are many people who immediately scolded Chung Iran, there are also people who helped her. I think they were the audience last night. But the persuasion was not strong enough and was immediately brushed down." Run Xiling frowned and said, "I'll watch the replay of last night first." "Manager Chung, there are too many online IDs." The website management said they didn't have time to delete them because the comments were too fast. The secretary reported to Chung Yin. Chung Yin felt a headache coming on. The result last night was announced on the spot, so after knowing that Chung Iran beat all the other contestants, he was very happy to have a good time in the hotel room after arranging for Zhong Luochen. But now he just woke up from the hotel and returned to the company. He wanted to pay attention to what happened after the competition, but he didn't expect it to be such a heart-wrenching thing. Were those people who scolded on the internet angry because their favorite singer was defeated by a nobody? It was not unreasonable to think so. After all, except Chung Iran, all the contestants in the competition had a solid foundation in the music industry and fought hard all the way. Well, don't report to me anymore. Let the website do more work. Chung Yun waved his hand. "Tell Li Zifeng to come see me. Oh, tell Chung Iran to come too." Li Zifeng and Chung Iran soon came to Chung Yun's office. Li Zifeng looked uneasy, but Chung Iran kept silent. No one knew what she was thinking. Chung Yun was a top henchman of the Zhong family who was good at observing people's facial expressions. He cleared his throat and said, "I think you know why I asked you to come here, right?" Li Zifeng hurriedly said, "Manager Chung, about the discussion on the internet. Chung Yun waved his hand. Don't mention it. I asked you to come here to tell you not to pay attention to the comments on the internet. There are keyboard warriors every day, but these people have no discipline at all. They're just looking for a sense of existence based on their own preferences. They can't make any big waves in the face of capital. Chung Yun shook his head, turning to Chung Iran. Iran, don't worry. The company will take care of these things for you. You just need to maintain your standard and continue the competition. This is only the first round. If you can crush them all the way, those people will have nothing to say in the end. They haven't heard your live performance, so they hide in the dark and show their poor scholar ability. Li Zifeng frowned. It would be fine if it was only a small number. But this was an overwhelming attack. Facing such a torrent of haters, Li Zifeng even started to doubt his own life. Crush them all the way? Chung Iran also frowned. He felt that this manager, Chung, didn't know what music was. This was probably the face of a businessman. He also thought of another businessman, the one who sold him this magical guitar. Why were there so many curses? Could it be that the guitar? At this time, Chung Yun suddenly received a phone call nervously. He nodded his head and said yes without any extra words. He hung up the phone and looked at Chung Iran, saying seriously, Iran, Mr. Zhong wants to see you again. Go and prepare now. Yin 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 PS2. Happy New Year. PS1. Whitestone's New Year's wish is to receive overwhelming gifts 23333. Chapter 473. In Chung Iran's opinion, the owner of Feiyun Entertainment must have huge assets. Then, even if Mr. Zhong's house wasn't as luxurious as an imperial palace, it should at least be an independent villa with unique craftsmanship. But in fact, it was much simpler than he expected. Of course, no matter how simple it wasn't a place that ordinary workers could afford to live in. In front of the door, Chung Yun suddenly stopped, looking at Chung Iran curiously. This time, only Chung Yun brought Chung Iran. He didn't even ask for a driver. He drove the car himself. Chung Yun asked curiously, Oh, you don't need to carry your guitar? Put in the car. It won't look good if you go in like that. He found Chung Iran was still carrying the guitar at this time, and couldn't help feeling strange. Of course, it wasn't too strange. For example, some music addicts didn't leave their hands all day long. When he was still in the capital, he had met some calligraphy and painting masters, and they also never left their hands all day long. No need, I'll carry it. Chung Iran tried to make herself look natural. If I put it down, I won't be used to it. Okay. Chung Yun didn't say anything more. Since Zhong Luochen valued this guy, Chung Yun naturally didn't plan to have any unpleasant things with Chung Iran. Besides, this guy's songs were really good. Chung Yun, who didn't pay much attention to music, felt that he was about to become Chung Iran's fan. So he was calm and polite, even tolerant. Let's go up, Mr. Zhong is waiting. Chung Yun raised his head and saw a vague figure on the second floor of the house, looking down through the floor-to-ceiling glass window. It was Zhong Luochen. Chung Iran felt that he was spying on her, and her mood turned solemn. After entering the gate of the house, Chung Iran found that the house was not as simple as it looked at the first sight. Especially one side of the house was almost covered with creepers and some mottled moss at the edge, which gave the feeling of an old house. Is this house okay? Chung Yun smiled. Chung Iran nodded. The longer she stood here, the more tranquil she felt. It's really good. I heard that the previous owner was a university professor, but he died for some reason. Chung Yun shrugged. This house was sold by his family to a real estate company. I didn't think it was good that someone died here, but Mr. Zhong said he liked it, so he bought it directly. It's just a few months ago. Chen glanced at the house. He said, Mr. Zhong, there's also a basement. It's a studio, right? Later on, second, Mr. Zhong said that it was converted into a wine cellar. If there's a chance, I'll bring you in to have a look. It's full of good wine. At this moment, Chung Iran saw Zhong Luochen, who was Luochen was Chung, and Chung Iran's Zhong, and Zhong. Zhong Luochen, who was holding onto the handrail of the stairs, didn't walk very quickly. Every step he took gave off the aura of an emperor who looked down on all living things. But his eyes never left Chung Iran for a moment. At this moment, Chung Iran had a strange yet familiar feeling. He seemed to see a trace of the mysterious merchant's temperament from Mr. Zhong. He didn't look like a person with 7 emotions and 6 desires. Is this person the one from that night? But Chung Yiran quickly denied this idea. First of all, their voices didn't look alike. Chung Yiran found that he didn't even have much impression of the mysterious merchant's voice. It was just his intuition that they didn't look alike. Then, their figures didn't look alike. He tried hard to recall, but found that he couldn't even remember the mysterious merchant's figure. But this feeling, what's going on? Chung Yiran frowned subconsciously. Coming. A faint smile suddenly appeared on Zhong Luochun's expressionless face. The almost perfect arc made his originally handsome face even more enchanting. Mr. Zhong, I brought Chung Yiran here. Chung Yin walked forward. Zhong Luochun nodded but suddenly said, Chung Yin, I haven't eaten. Drive out and buy some food for me. Chung Yin hurriedly asked, What do you want to eat? You decide. Zhong Luochun said casually. Chung Yin nodded without saying anything. He turned around and gave Chung Yiran a meaningful look, then went out. He knew this second young master just wanted him to leave. Of course, he would still buy the necessary food, and he would try his best to buy it. Otherwise, how could he be a golden henchman? I didn't expect second young master to value this Chung Yiran so much. Chung Yin drove away with a cigarette in his mouth. Before leaving, he took out a phone from his clothes. It wasn't his usual phone, but he often used it to contact a specific person. Hello, third miss, second young master, and Chung Yiran are talking privately, but I don't know what they're talking about. This car had been driving steadily. Chung Yiran didn't expect that the so-called opportunity would come so soon. After Chung Yin left, Zhong Luochun didn't even say anything, but directly took him to the wine cellar. Among the rows of shelves, there were many red wines that Chung Yiran couldn't name. Sitting on the circular sofa in the center, Zhong Luochun poured the wine himself. Have a taste to celebrate. Your performance last night was really good. Mr. Zhong, what do you want to talk to me about? Chung Yiran hesitated for a moment. He found the door of the wine cellar closed automatically. Before coming in, he found this wine cellar had 2 doors. The first one was even a huge steel door with an electronic lock. There have been a lot of discussions about you on the internet. Zhong Luochun smiled faintly. Or, let's talk about something else. Can I have a look at your guitar? There's nothing to see. It's just an antique. Chung Yiran suddenly became nervous. He wasn't even sure if his eyes betrayed him. Really? Zhong Luochun didn't force him. He didn't even feel disappointed, just smiled. When I saw you last time, you also carried it on your back. I thought it should have a very special meaning to you, so I was curious. Careless. Zhong Luochun's words made Chung Yiran feel something was wrong, and he realized a problem that he had been neglecting. No matter how much he liked music, it was impossible for him to play the guitar all day long like this. This was really too strange. After a long time, it was inevitable that people would notice something. However, if this guitar couldn't be in his sight all the time, he couldn't be at ease, a little bit. Chung Yiran nodded slightly. His eyes began to wander. It's just something in the past. There's only one exit here. Zhong Luochun suddenly said, and its voice controlled. It can only be opened by my command. Chung Yiran was stunned. His heart suddenly jumped. What exactly did the investor behind Feiyun Entertainment want to do? Zhong Luochun took a sip of red wine, indifferently said, Don't be nervous. What I meant was the content of our conversation here. Generally, no one knows. Of course. He narrowed his eyes, staring at Chung Yiran. Of course. I'm only talking about ordinary people. I'm afraid it's hard to say about others. Chung Yiran's heart jumped again from Mr. Zhong's words. He heard something else, faintly piercing the secret in the deepest part of his heart. Chung Yiran said, Mr. Zhong, I don't quite understand what you mean. Zhong Luochun said seriously, What I want to say is, Chung Yiran, have you ever thought that maybe you and I are the same kind of people?